We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H, and this week I'm here with...
Lee Overstreet. The pinch hitting is becoming a little more hitting than
No kidding,
pinching.
yes. Yeah, not so much on deck anymore, just expected up next. That's
it's just
the way
part
it
of the
goes.
week now lately, and I'm starting. I'm with you often enough now. I'm starting to shop for better lights.
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, I don't know. Did you get a chance to hear Tom's second update that was part of last week's show?
I'm always like 3 weeks behind
That
life
sounds about right.
when it comes to anything at all, except for like today as we record is election day in America.
It sure is.
That combined with my other stressors, I'm just going to need the bottle of Tums that's in the kitchen.
Right, yeah, there's
I'm just
nothing
going to
else
chug-a-lug it.
going on besides home theater discussion this week as we're recording this. Nothing to distract Lee in the background or that, anything that he needs to get out of the house and do later on that we can't keep everybody around too long today.
That's
like
all right.
That. But yes.
We vote in a shopping mall.
Okay.
Nowadays it's mostly just clothes because that's how shopping malls are now.
Seems like
it used to have everything back in the day. The sweetness of an 80s, 90s mall that had every product in the world. Now it's all on Amazon. But yeah, normally we walk in and it's just empty. Mm-hmm. Like if sometimes I feel like I'm the only one voting in the world. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a few exceptions in the past where it was a little bit crowded. So I'm hoping for that today. It makes me feel better, at least when it's somewhat busy.
I guess so. I mean, you've waited all the way till actual voting day in America, so I
because
imagine
I live
you
in
won't be the only
Alabama
one.
and they give us no other choice unless you request an absentee ballot well ahead of time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see if our Canadian Parliament decides to call a snap election now that everybody, seemingly including the Liberal Party themselves, is basically tired of the Liberals being the federal government at this point. It's just a lot of infighting going on with our current government. In addition to all the opposition, all the various opposition parties deciding it's about time that they want to force an election. So we'll see. Ours doesn't go on. Our promotion and that campaigning doesn't go on for nearly as long as
At
the
least
American
we have the
elections,
uncomplicated but uncomfortable binary choice.
Right, binary choice, sure.
Right.
Yeah. I think there are maybe pluses and minuses to that going on. But
Minuses.
to wrestle this podcast back to being AV Rant, I will
Rant.
say, Tom Andrew was on the show last week giving another update. He and I spoke for about an hour in case you missed it. And upshot being the good news is that they have now signed a lease, not fully moved in and everything yet, but at least they will have a roof over their head that is not borrowing from a family member and overstaying their welcome and all that type of thing. That also means, as Tom and I said, he will have a shipping address that he will be able to start sending out before too long, maybe another week from now. Grant some grace. There could be another week and a half, 2 weeks after you hear this, something like that. But we were hoping for about 2 weeks' time as of last week. So hopefully in about a week from now, he'll be ready to start giving out that shipping address to all the wonderfully generous people who have offered to send him items for free to replace some of the stuff that he lost during Hurricane Helene
I hope
and Milton.
he and we can have fun with the rebuilding of equipment.
Yes.
And make that part of the show.
Well, as he mentioned, until they are actually not even back in their original place after it's built, but the intention is to eventually sell and move to a new place entirely, still in St. Petersburg, Florida, but to a new place entirely. That he's not really planning to do a full dedicated theater rebuild until he's in the new place.
But he still will be watching stuff, so he'll
still be watching stuff.
He's going to hook up.
That's right.
If he gets equipment for at least 5.1, he's hooking up good surround sound. He's going to be watching movies, so that in itself is also interesting.
Yeah, but he's
Like
not
how-
really intending to put back together the theater that he had before in their place once it's rebuilt. So it's going to be a while before Tom has a fully dedicated whole hog home theater again. Continuing on the like sandwich way of saying things, the negative news that he shared last week is how the things that they had moved to self-storage, which itself was like 45 minutes away from their place because that was about as close as they could get when everybody was very hurriedly trying to get self-storage places, but the storage place flooded during Milton, so even the things they were attempting to save got soaked, and that's now a third insurance claim that they are dealing with. But yes, to make it the sandwich version of things, where a good thing on top and a bad thing in the middle and a good thing back at the bottom again, he is expecting to be back on the podcast in about... I mean, it was a month as of last week, so we might have like this week and 2 more weeks with Lee, something like that.
All right.
So that's kind of the plan moving forward, and that's where we all are.
Get
to
back to
recap things.
normalcy.
Something like that, something
little bit.
approaching it, resembling it. But yes, in other AVRant news, Lee and I were both on a different podcast this past weekend. What was that all about, Lee? You can fill everybody in.
DJ does his annual 25 hours of podcasting live, and I didn't even ask about bathroom breaks. I don't want to know how that works. 'Cause I struggle to do our 2-hour club sometimes.
Yes, that's right.
I always drink coffee right before the show. I don't know why I do that. So I don't know how he survives. But yes, and he's raising money, right? What is he raising money for?
Yeah, it's for Movember. That is the
Movember.
the sort of movement there for like men's health issues, raising awareness, raising funds, all towards men's health during the month of November, when many guys choose to grow their mustaches out. That's the way of showing the solidarity. Not something that Lee or I really do as far as the mustache part goes, but we are happy to join DJ on his Bright Side Home Theater podcast. He started it last year, doing it when the time zone, from daylight saving time back to standard time takes place, so that going from 6 a.m. on one day to 6 a.m. on the next day ends up being 25 hours.
That's right.
Because of the saving time shift there. So that's how it ended up being the 25 hours of home theater that DJ does. And if you want to check that out, go over to his YouTube channel, Brightside Home Theater on YouTube, and it's under the live section tab. It's not going to show up in the regular videos because it was all just broadcast live. He chopped it up into 3, I guess, 8-hour, 9-hour, something along those lines segments. And there we go.
That would be what you would have to do on YouTube to put it on there. You can't. I think the max is like 10 hours or something.
That's right. Yeah. So I appeared at the 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. time slot on the Saturday. That was the first day. And I don't know, when were you on there, Lee?
I was on Saturday night from 11 to midnight.
Okay.
Because, I'm a night owl, and it was really fun because there was 5 of us on at the same time. Other people just hung on for longer periods of time than me, and I got a kick out of it because I got them all talking about nostalgic old stuff, because you know how much I love old
That's the way to
analog
do
video.
It. Yep.
And we talked a little bit about that, and
nice.
I think they had a big laugh at the fact that as we mentioned cassettes and videotapes, that I could just like reach over and pick one up. Just like
that's going to be coming up later in today's show too, so keep that prop handy. Yeah, that's going to be
no
good.
problem. Yeah, right there. I can reach for a black and white photo like right over here.
There's
right. VCRs like right over there. So we had a lot of fun with that. I enjoyed that. And I used to have facial hair back in the day, in the like in the late 90s, when actually started in 95, a little bit before it was cool, but late 90s when like goatees got popular. I had a scraggly goatee and it was never good. I have very coarse scraggly hair, but it doesn't like fill in nice and dense.
Okay.
So it was never great. I always just looked a little, I don't know, a little hippie-ish maybe, but I made a very good devil one Halloween.
Okay.
Because we just enhanced that and put some like horns on my forehead and painted my face red. It was good times.
I've got the chia pet hair on every part of my head, so the hair just grows straight out like a chia pet. It's very, very difficult to manage. Doesn't work well for the beard either. So
you have to let it get long enough where it finally just flops over.
Yeah. That means it's a very, very awkward phase for a long period of time in between, which is the reason that this head has continued to keep getting shaved down. Because
dude, I'm dying to see you. I wish you'd grow your hair some just for
absolutely
fun.
ridiculous.
Just grow the hair for Movember.
It's such a commitment, and it's so awkward, and it's so awful and uncomfortable. So
come on, it's fun. There
that's
are
the way it
answers.
goes.
There are products that give you answers. If you need it to lay down, you can do it.
So anyway, before we get on to the regular segments of our podcast here, just once again, before we go any further, want to thank Anchor. We're going to continue doing that until Tom is back on the podcast and is able to say it for himself, because they really, really helped out Tom and his family following the hurricanes there. So provided him with a Solix portable power station that can act as a camping lamp and provides regular 15 amp household outlets. And they made tremendous use of that device. It has been really, really, really nice having that for them. So also had some gallium nitride power banks for charging up their USB devices and other USB cables and hubs and all sorts of things. Anything Tom basically asked of Anchor, they were happy to send to him. So we are tremendously grateful to them. Tom is super duper grateful to them, and we're going to continue to thank them, even though they're not like an official sponsor of the podcast or anything like that. They really helped out Tom, and they deserve their kudos, and we'll be forever grateful to them. So that'll be really nice when Tom is able to
Thanks for being
get back.
nice in a pinch, for sure.
is
Those little
what
things
it's all
make
about.
all the difference when you're in a bad situation.
It sure does. Yeah, it's really quite a thing. So yeah, we will go ahead and introduce that this is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And to get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing your questions to question@avrant.com. That is the email address. And yeah, we answer first in, first out. It is by far the best way to reach us, question@avrant.com. You can, of course, come to our website, which is avrant.com, where you can see all of our show notes. We have links to the products that we recommend or articles that we're referencing. We have links to our Flickr albums, where you can see the photos and pictures of anything that we might be talking about and referencing on the podcast. If you'd like to follow along, the audio-only versions are all there for you to listen to. Gigantic archive, 939 previous episodes to this one. Just page back and back and back and listen to your heart's content.
It is fun to listen to a really, really old one.
Isn't it, though? It can
discussing
be, yeah.
like HD DVDs.
That's right.
Good stuff.
And yeah, you can find us on social medias too. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to see the video, and if there are images that you'd like to see while we're talking about them in real time, you'll see them via the YouTube version. We have our YouTube page, youtube.com/AVRant. Simple as that. And yeah, then we're available to contact individually. I am Rob@avrant.com. Lee is at avrant.com.
Yep.
There's Tom as well, Tom@avrant.com. And we haven't given Joe at avrant.com yet. I think he got about 9 more years to wait.
I was about to say, if he gets one within the next 9 years, I'm going to be upset.
I know. There's going to be Hector A's over on Lee's side there. But yeah.
But all the email addresses are 3 letters at avrant.com. I think
it's
that's
got to
just
be.
great.
That is now a requirement.
Except question.
Well, yeah, that's right. But I want to give my thanks to Joe Klusnick for guest hosting last week. That was very nice to have him on again and filling in there. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we got social medias. I'm at First Reflect. If you type in that search and I don't show up, then I'm not on whatever social media you're searching for, First Reflect, because that's my handle. And where can folks find you, Lee, if you're on the social medias?
Well, I got to be honest, nowadays, the only account where I'm active on social media, where it's just kind of open to the public, is going to be the Tesla Lusa account, a combination of the word Tesla and Tuscaloosa. So Tesla Lusa. And, you know, I focus mostly on EV stuff when I'm on Twitter X. And on Threads, it's a lot of politics, so I don't know what to tell you. It's just going to be weird. You can find me on Threads or X, but it's going to be like psychotic. It's going to be 2 completely different things. But if you just want to follow along, it's fun. So come on, give it a go.
All righty.
To get to me about this show, it is probably just easiest to email lee@avrant.com.
Okay, so there it is. And with all of that introduction and preamble done, we can talk about what we watched. Now, Lee has been away from the podcast for an entire week last week. It's been 2 weeks since we've heard from Lee Overstreet. He must have watched a ton of movies and TV shows, right?
Listen, I am I'm doing such a Lee thing the past couple weeks. So, the last time I was on, I talked about how I just jumped on and watched 4 movies.
That's right.
Right. So now this time I've watched no movies.
Okay.
Life has just been stressful. I mentioned my mom's health, and that whole situation just keeps throwing new curveballs.
Okay.
And we're getting there. Got a new thing we're trying this week. So we'll see how it goes. So that, kind of puts a damper on things, and the old ADD kind of gets you, and it's just hard to do. So and also I'm doom watching a lot of cable news.
Okay, sure. Well, yes,
I've actually been a cable news fan, if you want to call it that, since like the late 80s. I always loved watching CNN as a nerdy kid, as a teenager, and that kept on through even after they stopped being news, as I would define it, and became commentary like every other news channel.
A lot of editorializing, that's for darn sure.
Yeah, it's mostly just, here, I will now mention a topic and 4 people will yell about it.
Right,
That's just all they do now, but I still watch. Why do I do it? I don't know. I'm probably going to get burn in with the, that bright red at the bottom, just bright red.
You got the Chiron down there for sure.
So hopefully the LG OLED system of moving things around a few pixels, and I have on the burn-in protection where if something is very bright and static, it will dim it after a period of time.
Yeah.
And that is a nice little feature in OLEDs, and so far I haven't noticed anything at all. So
good.
Like we said years ago, I don't think burn-in is the fear that everybody has. It would have to be almost like a airport scheduled TV screen that just puts a static thing on all the time. If you're a normal human and you're watching some movies and TV shows and YouTube and some cable news and gaming a little bit, I think it's going to be fine.
I think you've also followed the sort of settings advice that we gave though as well, and lowered that OLED bright setting so that it, because many of the like pre-built picture modes, so I can never blame somebody for using one of the preset picture modes and assuming that it's going to be safe to operate that way. Maybe Vivid, you might have question marks around that one in particular, but like many of just the standard picture modes in that are like an OLED light setting of 80 out of 100, and if you left it there all the time on just one cable news channel, burn-in could be potentially a risk. So we always recommend lowering that to like 45 or lower, because that's also more accurate to what the standard dynamic range is supposed to be.
I'm certain I'm not that low, but I started with the ISF bright.
Okay.
And then I brought it down from there, if I recall. It's been so long. I got it like I wanted it. And then why would you memorize the settings, right? Yeah. I actually think I wrote them down, like actually made a note somewhere physically on paper.
Not a bad idea. Or snap a picture of it with your phone. Yeah.
But where's that piece of paper, Rob? I don't know. So, man, I should go look at it again. I'm afraid to touch anything because it pleases me so. I got it just where I love it. And just like the room correction and the subwoofer settings, I'm afraid to touch anything.
That's right.
I'm afraid to hang a picture. I don't want anything to change. It's just right. So I'm not gonna do anything like that. Also, Alabama didn't play football this week. So I don't know what to do, man. I'm lost. So I have a feeling that tonight being election returns, I'm going to be watching something other than election returns. I'll probably
try to get your mind off it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll probably dip in a little bit. I'm probably going to be drinking a little bit. So yeah.
As soon as you dip in, I think that might be Lee's evening right there, just all shot. So I hope not.
No,
we'll
I can't wait to find out how I feel when I look at this episode in the future.
Yeah. Posterity.
Well, there you go. So there's all my mental issues and why I haven't watched movies. But I have a feeling more movies are coming soon once we get past.
I hope so. I know for a fact you've got a list of things that I've sent you that you could be watching and enjoying. So
good stuff you have listed.
Those are always the options there. So since Lee didn't have a bunch of movies and TV shows to talk about, I will fill in what I watched this week.
Right on.
Continuing on with my lovely running gag at this point, I did watch episode 7 of The Penguin. It continues to be utterly fantastic. And here I'm going to mention, I highlighted Deirdre O'Connell in a previous episode where she plays Oswald Cobb, the Penguin's mother, Frances. Well, this had a flashback section, pretty lengthy flashback sections throughout episode 7, and they brought in a different actress, Emily Mead, to play the younger version of Frances Cobb, and I loved this so much because I'm like, we have all this nonsense with the deep fakes and the de-aging and the CGI faces and the weirdness that always looks, and the mouths never move correctly and all that type of stuff. And I'm like, oh, they just found a woman who is younger and resembles enough the other actress playing this role. They had the same dialect coaches working with everybody so that she spoke in a very similar fashion. Actress was very good at mimicking many of the same mannerisms and the cadence of speaking that, and it works 100%. There is no problem suspending any disbelief that you are seeing a younger version of this. I'm like, can we just go back?
It's almost as though actors can act.
There's that,
I mean, what if you just have actors act?
That if you have decent casting directors, that they can find people who close enough resemble. You have a good hair and makeup team, and you light things correctly. Yeah, it's just these amazing things, these lost art forms and techniques that went on. But just another fantastic episode. And I wanted to comment, with the writers who were working on The Penguin, it seems as though, this is just my personal take on it now, but it seems as though they set themselves a distinct task, which is to have Oswald and Sophia, the two main characters. How awful, how horrific, what terrible, unforgivable things can we have these characters do, and then have our two actors, Colin Farrell and Kristen Milioti, wrench you back into still somehow rooting for them with just sheer emotional performances. Like, it doesn't even seem like they're writing a plot anymore. It seems like they're intentionally writing the worst things these people could do just for the fun of letting the actors bring you back to their side with their performance. Like, it seems like it's a game at this point.
You're making a great case week after week for this show, and maybe this is the first thing I try when I jump back on.
I hope so. Yeah, no, there is no way we should be in any sense on the side of Oswald and or Sophia at this point. They are utterly unforgivable in the things that they have done, and yet the performances are so amazing. Kristen Milioti can just lean back against a wall and begin to cry, and you're like, oh, that poor woman, after the absolutely monstrous thing she just did a moment ago. It's so much fun. So speaking of so much fun, I watched The Substance.
This looks intriguing now. I got to admit, I've seen previews for this.
Yes. So this is Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley playing what is supposed to be a younger, more perfect version of Demi Moore. Kind of hilarious because this entire movie is about aging in Hollywood, particularly for actresses, being cast aside, and they make a big deal about the instant Demi Moore's character turns 50, she is cast aside. But of course, Demi Moore herself in real life just turned 61. So even there, they're having, she has to play younger than she is in real life in the movie about how you're cast aside as soon as you're aging. And so Margaret Qualley is here as the younger, under 30, more perfect version of the same character that Demi Moore is playing. Dennis Quaid is here too, just being the absolute most disgusting creature that has ever existed on screen.
All right.
And then I want to give a shout out to Jan Bean, who we never see in this movie because we only hear his voice. But if we didn't have that voice in this movie, it wouldn't have been as good as it is, because his vocal performance just absolutely fits perfectly and really, really works well. We only ever hear him over the phone and on one little pre-prepared video that he made, but we never see his face. But he deserves some credit there. So this is written and directed by Coralie Forget, I think is how it's pronounced. She is French, and what I wanted to comment as far as, how much I enjoyed or didn't enjoy this movie, I loved 3/5 of this movie. It is a 5-act structure, and I loved 3/5 of it. I was kind of like, what are you doing in Act 4? Not that what was going on didn't make any sense, because this is really a thematic movie and a exceedingly obvious metaphor movie. Like, they're not trying to, they're absolutely not the opposite of trying to be subtle. They are trying to be as absolutely in your face, as obvious as they can possibly be. But just some of the things that played out in Act 4, I was like, everything was set up for it to be a painful painstaking, just like rip your guts out sort of confrontation that goes on in Act 4. Everything is there in how everything that's been set up, and I was expecting this like really long, painful, dragged out, slow, excruciating conflict to be taking place on screen. And it was at that time in the movie that they decided to speed everything up to like double the pace that they had been taking throughout the rest of the movie. And I mean, everything in this movie was done very deliberately. And so it couldn't have been a mistake, but when I was watching, I'm like, not that everything was supposed to make any kind of literal sense in this movie, but it just didn't make sense to me why they chose
pace of everything changed.
Yeah, to suddenly speed up when everything was saying it should have slowed down. Maybe that was the point. Maybe you were like, yeah, it's all supposed to slow down, so it all speeds up. I couldn't quite figure it out though. It didn't make
as you get older, everything seems to speed up.
No, but this was like people
it's a
who
metaphor for that.
People who absolutely should not be able to move quickly are like running down the stairs, and it just I don't know. It threw me. It took me out of the movie. It was so jarring and strange. And then the fifth act, the very final scene of this movie, I loved. Clearly, they had written the final scene of this movie before they began this entire process. Unlike some movies that we see today, where they are clearly figuring things out on the fly. But this goes into complete and utter, and honestly quite traditionally French satire and surrealism. There's this completely which again is completely intentional, but it went so far into the like Scooby-Doo monster type of acting that I was just like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I can quite. Yeah, I was like, I can't quite hang on to still liking what I'm seeing on this screen at this moment.
See, it's almost making you talk like Shaggy. So,
So I mean, I loved, like I say, 3/5 of this movie, and then it kind of lost me towards the end, just in terms of emotional response, but. I mean, everything that's being said so overtly about how horrible Hollywood can be, and the way people feel, and yes, Demi Moore's character makes every possible bad, wrong decision. They're not trying to shy away from. She had every opportunity at every moment of this movie to make one better choice that would have avoided everything horrible that's going on in here. But I mean, that's not the point of the movie.
We've all watched people in our lives do the same thing.
That's right.
Just make one better decision, won't you, please?
That's what it is. So I mean, I've purposely left out every bit of plot detail that I can. I don't want to spoil anything about this. What I absolutely want to comment on the technical side, because I mean, it's shot very nicely. The colors are vivid. It is obvious that. Do you remember that? Like kind of techno beat song just called Satisfaction, where the second version of the music video was just like scantily clad women all oiled up using power tools.
You would think I'd remember something like that, but somehow I don't.
Italian DJ Benny something who put
just
out
that
song.
one up.
Yeah, 1990s. So it's rather obvious that many scenes in this movie and the soundtrack in this movie took tremendous inspiration from that video in particular, because some of it is almost one-for-one recreation that's going on there, both the music and the type of shots that are going on, and the scantily clad people all oiled up. This movie does not shy away. I mean, it promotes graphic nudity, so if you don't want
this
too much
one on the list,
if you don't watch too much graphic nudity, stay away from this. It is classified as a horror movie, but it's really not scary at all. It's disgusting. That's the type of horror that we're dealing with.
All right.
It's
gross,
disgusting horror,
but also
not scary
naked
horror.
Stuff and
Lots
it's
of naked
confusing
stuff,
at the
for
end.
Sure.
I mean, you're kind of selling this one on me too.
So I mean, it's a wild time. It is absolutely one you come out and you're like, holy smokes, what did I just see? But the thing I really wanted to highlight is the sound. The sound in this, if you got a full-blown home theater, you want to crank this up and listen to it, because this is like the sound is in your face. It is so squelchy and gross and gloopy and all of these types of close mic. The Foley artists for this movie must have had a whale of a time doing
just
everything.
Smashing watermelons
they were going nuts with the gloopy, squelchy sounds in here.
Squishing pudding in front of a microphone.
Can't exactly say this is ASMR. ASMR. It is not going to help you relax and put you to sleep. It is meant to disgust you and keep you off kilter, and it does a fantastic job on the sound side of things. So it is a showcase of a type. I'm not going to say a pleasant type, but it is definitely a showcase for audio. So that was the substance. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting or hoping for. I didn't love my experience with it as much as I was hoping to, but 3/5 of it I was over the moon about. So yeah, there we go. And then I was like, this was purposeful. This wasn't completely accidental. I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch another Margaret Qualley movie, because why not? Why not keep it together thematically through one actor there? So I watched Drive Away Dolls, which is written and directed by Ethan Coen. But this is not a Coen brothers movie, because Joel Coen was not involved in this. Ethan Coen and his wife, Trisha Cook, wrote this movie together years ago. There were multiple famous actresses along the way who were all tied to this movie, but it never got made until recently. So we end up with Margaret Qualley and Geraldine Viswanathan, I think is how her name is pronounced, the Australian actress. So this is, and I mean, this is what Ethan Coen and Trisha Cook themselves have said about this. They didn't want this movie to be called Drive Away Dolls. That wasn't the original title for this movie. And at the end of the movie, they have the title Drive Away Dolls, the graphic of it fall away to reveal the title that they wanted this movie to be, which was Drive Away Dykes. And I guess the studio didn't want it to be called that. And they're like, what this movie is, it is a lesbian road trip movie. That's what they're like. They're like proudly about it. That's what this is. You've got one very forward, outgoing personality extrovert, along with the introvert, who are friends but become lovers type of thing. But of course, it's Ethan Coen, so there is a crime story involved as they go along. There must be a crime story involved in anything that came from one or both of the Coen brothers. And it still has the same delivery that we see from the Coen brothers, where the dialogue does not sound natural. Everybody speaks in a little bit strange, clipped, it's humorous, and you kind of have to get used to it and just put that aside. That's the way everybody speaks. Margaret Qualley is supposed to be from Texas. She's doing some kind of accent, but I did not sound like, I'm not an expert on Texas accents, but that didn't sound like a Texas accent to me.
Listen, I can tell you that as a Southerner, any accent from Texas across the South over to Virginia, it's just wrong in the movies. It's almost always wrong. It's always this cartoonish version. I mean, we've got
pretty
people around here that
speak
kind of cartoonish, sure, but it's never accurate. I don't know if it's because every accent is always inaccurate. Like if there's a Boston accent in a movie, is that accurate? But I think it really gets wrong when it's Southern accents.
See, I'm not an expert. Maybe somebody will come along and go, no, that was like specific to this one area, really, really accurate or something. But I don't know. It seemed a bit, overdone. But I don't think by mistake, because I mean, this is, Ethan Coen, and that's the Coen brothers. When they do things are overdone on purpose. So this was basically maybe one or two TV episodes presented as a movie. Okay. It didn't really have the feel of a feature film. This really seemed like, other than their, it would have to be like, TVMA cable television for some of the content that's in here. So it's not like a network TV show. That's not what I mean. But it's just like, it didn't really have feature film type of thing. And then seemingly very purposely, the editing and especially the transitions in this movie were like super duper over the top amateur hour. It was really weird. Like I'm talking star wipes and like the whole rectangle of your image like rotates and spins away. And there were these like psychedelic scenes with Miley Cyrus for some reason that had literally nothing to do with the movie. It was. There were some.
Listen,
you're making odd
me
choices.
Curious, but.
Yeah, there were some kind of odd choices. So I can't say I was like over the moon about this, but it felt like something two people came up with late at night when they were maybe a little bit altered and thought was really, really funny and interesting. But then you see it on screen and you're like, well, maybe if I was there, maybe if I'd been one of the two of you while you came up with this, it'd be an absolute riot. But here's the other thing. This is Ethan Coen, an absolute film buff, and like every shot in this movie, I think, was an homage, a copy of some other movie's shot, because I recognized a lot of the shots in this movie. I was like, oh, that's from whatever, and that's from... I didn't recognize every shot, but it wouldn't surprise me if literally every shot in this movie was like lifted from something else, because it had that sort of feel. And then I have not read enough Henry James works to know for sure, but Henry James is frequently referenced in this movie, and specifically the short novel The Europeans is mentioned here. I've never read The Europeans by Henry James, so I don't know how much this is trying to parallel what was going on there, but that seemed really important, and I was just ignorant. That's on me. I was just ignorant of what they were referencing, because I don't know The Europeans by Henry James. So
kind of like the idea of every scene is a shot from another movie.
That
could be. There's a Rihanna song like that where every lyric is the name of a hit song in the past.
Yeah.
So that could be fun, but otherwise this sounds exceedingly weird.
Yeah, there definitely is some good humor in this. I enjoyed the performances, because everybody who's on screen, and there's lots of cameos because everybody wants to work with the Coens. So yeah, like everybody's given it their all in this. It starts off with almost like a 1960s Batman canted angle portrayal of a crime that just happened, and yeah, it's that type of movie. So people are here to have fun. They clearly are having fun. The fun they're having is on screen, so in just that sense, it's fun to watch, because everybody is clearly having a ball making this movie. So if nothing else, I give it that much. Yeah, that's enough of that section. My goodness, we've talked for a while, because it is time to thank our listeners of the week here at this point.
Yes.
Listeners of the week are people who have supported this podcast in some way, and there are many people who are helping out Tom directly right now. If you come to avrant.com and go over to the right-hand side, there is an image of a cup of coffee, and it says support AVRant, and you click on any of that, and it will take you to PayPal, where you can give a donation, and all of those donations through PayPal are going straight to Tom and his family right now, and he's been good about keeping me updated whenever somebody sends in a PayPal donation to him. We might have missed someone along the way at this point. We don't know for sure, but the names I definitely have are Jason S., Richard B., Karl R., Andrew H., and Gregory H. Thank you all so much for sending in those PayPal donations. They are really, really, really appreciated by Tom especially, but by me as well. So that's wonderful to see that support continuing on. If you'd like to support the podcast financially and help us cover all the behind-the-scenes expenses of keeping this thing going, you can do so automatically if you go to patreon.com/AVRantPodcast. We have 132 patrons over there right now. I think because the month changed, somebody's credit card expired, because we were holding steady there at 133 for quite a few weeks. So check that expiration date on your credit card if it was
That reminds
November.
me, I need to re-up a domain name I own.
That's the way it goes.
Yo, shoot. I'll probably have about a week. I just thought of that. Yeah, I remember they sent me an email saying
reminded.
The payment didn't work because the card expired. Oh, shoot. I better do that.
Be that.
Because I've had that domain name since 1998.
Yeah, I don't want to lose that. Holy smokes.
That's the old radio show.
Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. That is the place to come if you'd like to sign up or re-sign up, as the case might be. And those funds we are using to pay all the bills for AVRant. So that's very, very nice for people who are supporting us that way. And then, if you don't want to just hand over money in some way, shape, or form, you can still support the podcast in other ways. And if you do so, we will mention you here. So John T sent in yet another movie code for Tom to try out. So appreciate that. Infinite Gary also sent another movie code. He sent several. So Tom is appreciative of that. It is a way he can take a little break once in a while and watch something there. So that's very, very nice. Thank you, John. Thank you, Gary. Aaron, he sent in a Canadian movie code for me to check out. So isn't that nice? He didn't want me to feel left out. So that's very nice. Thank you, Aaron. I did redeem that. It worked. So fantastic. Now, John, he came through offering Tom a Furman 8-outlet surge protector, an older AMD-based PC with a webcam, an Ethernet switch, and HDMI and Ethernet cables. If any of those items are helpful to Tom, he's like, yep, happy to ship those over to Tom once that shipping address is available to be given out. So that's very nice. John also has a 55-inch Vizio TV and 2 Crown brand XLI 800. Those are Class AB stereo amplifiers. He's actually looking to sell those. So he didn't want to just like give those to Tom for free, but he's like, I'll cut Tom an excellent deal if Tom does want to purchase those. And hey, Tom has some funds that have been coming in for to replace things that he lost. So it wouldn't be completely inappropriate. But that's wonderful. Thank you so much, John, for offering those things to Tom. And Nathan also offered to send Tom a pair of Triad bronze satellite speakers. And he's like, I heard someone was giving Tom some KEF Q series speakers. These aren't as good as those, but hey, maybe Tom needs another pair of speakers to act as surrounds. So the KEFs could be used up front. The Triad bronze satellites could be used as surrounds, perhaps.
I'm telling you, this is content for this podcast. Cobbling together a home theater system from donations and offers and seeing what you can throw together in an apartment that you're going to be in for a while or a house that you know you're not going to stay in. This is the kind of thing that people do. And so this will be very interesting, and it's very nice of people just listing everything they can send. Tom.
It is pretty amazing. It's remarkable. So we thank you all so much. We also want to thank people who just send in notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going in some way, shape, or form, which I'm happy to say we've been able to do throughout all of this. That's haven't missed a week yet. So John T, Mike H, Sasi, Gurinder, who noted that the Costco's in Ontario, Canada, where he lives, they are clearing out their remaining stock of LG C3 OLED TVs at terrific prices. He's like, I've never seen OLED TVs so cheap. And they're just like trying to get rid of those C3s from 2023 at this point. So if you're in Ontario, I don't know if it's true in BC as well or across the rest of Canada, but for sure in Ontario, he dropped into the Costco. He's like, whoa, those are some low LG OLED prices.
And they're going to be great. There's nothing wrong with those TVs.
No, from the C3 to the C4 was barely a change. But we have more names as well. We have Karl. We have Kevin, who says he watches every AVRant episode and is a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club. So thank you. Hello, Kevin. Karl, who says he found the perfect rock climbing gym for Tom once he gets back into rock climbing because the place that he found mounted the urinals in the bathrooms high up on the walls along with some climbing holds around them so that you have to use your climbing skills in order to use the urinal in the washroom. What? Could possibly go wrong?
What does the floor look like in that place?
I don't want to know.
What does the climbing wall look like in that place?
I don't want to know.
Kidding me? Where? Now I want to know where that is.
It's clearly a publicity stunt. I'm not including the photo because even without any people in it, it's kind of gross. So I don't want to include the photo in the podcast, and it won't be in the Flickr album. But I will have a link to the thing that Karl was talking about. So if you want to burn your eyes afterwards, that's on you. You have to actively click that link. I'll put a warning. But that's still not the end of the names there. We've got Aaron and we have Paul, who was glad to hear Tom last week during the episode. So that is fantastic. Thank you all so much for sending in those notes of gratitude, and a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
And a quick thanks to Nelson, who sent me an email, and he said my radio voice is a match for Matt Stinchcom's TV voice. So that's an ESPN commentator. So I feel a lot of pressure to do a big radio voice.
Ah, right. No, I think he's just talking about the way you normally speak. It's well practiced. It works.
I guess. You sit me in front of a microphone and I do overpronounce. If you come hang out with me, sit on the couch in the living room, I don't think I talk exactly like this unless you get me animated on a certain topic. So, but if you stick a big fat microphone in front of me, something changes and I do have to do that. But I that's a lot of pressure to sound like a professional sportscaster. Come on.
Well, with all that, I think we're about ready for this week's news.
Yeah, let's talk about some news. First of all, via Sasi, RBH has added an additional speaker model to their 3rd generation Impression series. It's a new on-wall model available with either their silk dome tweeters or their reference folded ribbon tweeters, and in either a black or white cabinet finish. The 555 IW has 2 silk dome tweeters and 3 5¼ inch woofers for $825 each. The 555 IWR upgrades to 2 folded ribbon tweeters for $1,150 each. Around back, you'll find 2 pairs of binding posts, and it's more than just bi-wiring or bi-amping that's going on there. The 555 IWR can be used just as a single left, right, or center speaker. But of course, excuse me, the dual tweeter design and the layout of the drivers would make them a really unusual driver arrangement that would raise questions about sound wave interference patterns.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be a woofer, tweeter, woofer design.
That's what it is.
And still, it would just be a two-way speaker. But the two pairs of binding posts on the back allow the 555 models to act as two completely separate speakers that just happen to share a single enclosure. So these are really a separate 555 IWR and a 5 IWR in one long box. So a 55 IWR and a 5 IWR.
Lead to a 555.
Smashed together as a woofer,
right.
tweeter, woofer.
That's what it ends up looking like. Yep.
So RBH has some previous designs for in-wall and on-wall models that are similar. And the idea is that with a pair of 555 IWR speakers mounted on either side of your display, the 55 IWR portions will act as your front, left, and right speakers, while the two 5 IWR portions will act as a split center speaker for setups where a single center speaker either above or below the display simply doesn't fit. So more options, but just unusual, and watch how you might use it.
Pretty much, yeah. So, I don't know if or when I'm ever going to recommend this model of speaker.
Yeah, it's very unusual.
We're actually going to be talking when Sasi has some questions later on, and we'll dig into these a little bit more because he's got some questions about them. But kind of interesting, they have added yet another model to that Impression Series lineup. You can buy it direct, $825 if you want the dome tweeter versions, or $1150 each if you want the folded ribbon tweeter version. So not super inexpensive. There are only the on-wall versions. They don't have like a semi-tower or gigantic monitor style version of these. It's only the wall mountable versions that are available for this 555 model of speaker in the Impression Series.
A little bit complex. That reminds me, I keep meaning to contact RBH because I have some earbuds of theirs, some Bluetooth earbuds.
Yeah, I remember those.
You remember those? And my favorite, they send a lot of little ear pads.
Yes.
But they're discontinued now. They don't sell any of their earbuds anymore. My favorite there were some that were gray, dense foam.
Okay.
And they were perfect because they sealed up really nice, stayed in my ears, and I could mow the lawn, and it would block out the lawnmower, and I could hear music. However, I've worn those out.
Yeah.
I wonder if they have any in a drawer somewhere.
Right. Yeah,
Y'all got maybe in a drawer somewhere at RBH headquarters?
RBH is one of those companies that responds with actual human beings when you call them on the phone, so it's worth a call. It can't hurt.
I need to check because, man, I miss using those. No one wants to just put in earbuds and have to have their own thoughts in their head. Like, that's a nightmare when you're mowing the lawn and you're me. So if you liked the idea of Netflix's Choose Your Own Adventure style interactive specials, but you never got around to clicking your way through all of them, you better get a move on. At the moment, Netflix lists 24 titles in their interactive specials section, but they've announced that as of December 1st, only 4 of those titles will remain available. Black Bandersnatch,
That's Black Mirror : Bandersnatch, so it's part of the Black Mirror
Bandersnatch,
series.
yes.
Yeah.
Black Mirror Bandersnatch, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Kimmy versus the Reverend, Ranveer versus Wild with Bear Grylls, and You versus Wild.
Those are the 4 that will still be available.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, that was some good stuff. The other 20 titles will all disappear. Puss in Boots, Carmen Sandiego, Boss Baby, your interactive Netflix stories were just too pure for this world.
Yeah, that's what it was.
A Netflix spokesperson said the technology served its purpose, but is now limiting as we focus on technological efforts in other areas. That's one way to put it.
That was some wonderful marketing speak right there. I love that quote.
It served its purpose to be a thing we could say we had, and now we're going to say we have other things.
We tossed it out there. We got a few news stories out of it. Nobody watched it, apparently, because it wasn't worth keeping around on their servers.
Right.
So there it goes.
Ouch.
I can't say I played through any of the interactive choose your own adventure style shows. I mean, the only one I really kind of heard about was the Black Mirror episode, the Bandersnatch episode. So they're keeping that one. That was the only one I heard of. So I'm assuming it was the most famous of them. Apparently that You versus Wild was pretty fun because that's another
Right.
Bear Grylls thing. So
I think I've watched
people had
like
fun with
2 Black Mirror episodes just
Oh, okay.
randomly from different
yeah.
seasons.
Yeah.
And I keep meaning to watch more, but then you know my whole problem about
There's-
watching shows and movies. But I
That
should
is
get-
like individual episode series, so you do not have to watch those
Yes.
in order. It's not serialized or anything like that. So
Exactly. So, as per usual, we have delayed and delayed, but now it's time for this question answering podcast
yeah,
to answer questions.
let's get some.
Heck yeah. Mike H with the first question to be answered on this show. Somehow we missed Mike's question that he sent in a few weeks ago, but thankfully Mike was understanding and he sent it in again when he didn't hear it mentioned on the podcast.
Yes. So I do want to just say, if that ever happens, right? If you've sent a question to us, if you've emailed question@avrant.com and you don't hear your question answered on the podcast, or like, if you sent it in on Sunday night and I don't mention that, yeah, we got the question, but we'll get to it next week. Nothing like that. Yeah, please, by all means, send it in again, because sometimes things do end up going through a spam filter and it doesn't reach me, or,
Right.
emails are getting forwarded or whatever, or it's possible I just completely manually misfiled the thing and thought I had written it down and put it in last week's folder instead of this week's, whatever it might be. Mistakes get made, so that is never intentional. If we missed out on answering your question, we are not intentionally ignoring you, and we're not like just cherry picking and only answering certain questions. Of course, that's the norm, right? Places that are getting hundreds of questions every day, they are not going to literally answer every single one of them, but that's not the case here. We're not purposely ignoring anybody or choosing not to answer. Send it in again, please, if we ever missed it. So thank you, Mike, for doing that.
Very true. Yeah, because I've had emails that were intended for lee@avrant.com go to a spam folder.
Yeah.
And that was disturbing. So
Stuff
I
can happen.
took it out of the spam folder, and hopefully the system will know not to do that anymore. Regional sports networks in the U.S. are undergoing a lot of changes lately, with Diamond Sports Group under bankruptcy protection and various Comcast and Fox Sports contracts expiring this year. Several NHL, NBA, and MLB teams are making the decision to go streaming only for regional distribution for games that aren't being broadcast nationally. In Chicago, where Mike lives, the regional broadcast agreement with NBC Comcast came to an end on October 1st, so the new Chicago Sports Network was formed to carry games for the Blackhawks, Bulls, and White Sox.
Yeah.
They confirmed an agreement with DirecTV but not Dish, and with Fubo but not YouTube TV.
Yeah.
And they've sent multiple offers to try to negotiate a deal with Comcast, but no agreement has been reached with them. So, CHSN recently announced that even though they are developing their own standalone streaming app, they aren't launching it as yet, as they hope to continue negotiating with Comcast.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if you aren't a DirecTV or Fubo subscriber and you want to watch the regional broadcast while living in the Chicago area, your one and only option is over-the-air antenna with an antenna and an ATSC 1.0 tuner. They are only broadcasting in 1080i, because that's the broadcast standard, and they are only using MPEG-4 compression, so not all ATSC 1.0 tuners are compatible. Now, that is interesting to me, because the original standard for ATSC 1.0 is MPEG-2.
That's correct.
And so I watched a video not long ago. It's a fellow who has a low-power transmitter, an ATSC transmitter. He is a low-power station, and he experimented with broadcasting 4K via ATSC 1.0.
Okay.
And so if your receiver can decode his method of encoding, and he was using MPEG-4 and he tried a few others, turns out that the ATSC 3.0 standard for 4K isn't actually necessary.
No, I mean, when you think that you can send 4K resolution over streaming, that type of bit rate coming over streaming is lower than what would fit within an ATSC 1.0 broadcast, just as far as bandwidth.
19 megabits per second they have available.
And you can do 4K resolution streaming at 12 or 10. So.
Right, and he proved, this particular person, gosh, I'll have to find a link to this video. It's so interesting. But it was proven that you could even do multiple channels and still have them look good because of the compression standards. And so it's interesting. The ATSC 3.0 standard has some advantages as far as reception, especially mobile reception. But the changeover is not easy And it turns out it's really more about being able to get people to pay for content. It's more about the copyright protection and getting people to pay than it is
that's
about
coming into this. Yep.
Yeah. So Mike is willing to get a TV antenna, but he'd like to be able to record some games on a DVR. So what would we recommend for an ATSC and over-the-air DVR solution? He figures he won't be the only person looking for this sort of solution with all the upheaval in regional sports broadcasts these days. So believe it or not, I even have a recommendation.
Okay.
But it's a nerdy recommendation. So let's talk about what we have written down here, and then I'll tell you what this is.
Sure. So I'll just say, like, my easy go-to answer. Anytime somebody says, I want to tune into over-the-air broadcasts, I've got a digital antenna hooked up, I want a tuner, and I want to be able to record what I'm watching. And normally, it is very convenient if you are the sort of person who records things to be able to record one thing while you're watching a second program live, or be able to record two things at once. That's something a lot of people want. So ZapperBox is almost the only game in town in terms of ATSC 3.0 next-gen TV support. Right. And that isn't really applicable in this specific case because they're only broadcasting in 1080i and ATSC 1.0, so it's not as though the ZapperBox is necessary in this instance, but it still remains my go-to. Simply because at $275 for the ZapperBox M1, that is the version that has two tuners. Both of them can tune into ATSC 3.0 channels and critically can tune into the DRM protected encrypted channels, the digital rights management's copy protected channels. The ZapperBox is the only dual tuner solution that exists right now to be able to record and decrypt those copy protected next gen TV channels.
And that's why it costs what it costs.
Yeah. And, at $275, it's not so crazy expensive that I think it's, outlandish. So in terms of, hey, I got the antenna anyway, now I can tune into anything that's being broadcast in my area and record it and record two things at once. I'm like, well, that's a solution that covers a lot of bases. If any of these regional broadcasters were to upgrade and start doing ATSC 3.0, you're ready for it if you already have a ZapperBox. And you can add as much storage to this thing that you want. It's got a couple of USB ports or a micro SD card slot, so you can add your memory to it as much as you want there and record to your heart's content. They're also taking pre-orders right now, expecting to ship next month in December, two new devices, the M2 and the M3. Now, there used to be two different versions of the M1. That was the dual tuner version at $275, and for some reason, a single tuner version at $250, only $25 less. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just pay the extra $25 to get the second tuner? It made not that much sense to me. But they're doing away with the single tuner version of the M1 and replacing it with the M2. That's going to sell for $200, and that's a single tuner version with not as much memory built in. So like you can only pause for 1 minute by default unless you add some more storage space to that M2. They're also bringing in an M3, or what they're calling their Zapper Mini, for $130. That doesn't have any tuners at all. The idea of the M3 is that any other rooms in the house where you want to be able to draw on the recordings you made on your M1 or your M2 unit. This is like just a little, streaming box unit to plug into your TV, basically, to make it part of the ZapperBox system, is that M3. But both the M2 and the M3, they'll be coming out in December. The M1, the dual tuner version, available right now for $275. In addition to that, and I forgot the image on this, so I'll click away from that. In addition to that, if you don't pay any subscription fee or anything whatsoever, then you only get a 24-hour TV guide. So you can only program things to record 24 hours in advance and have a 24-hour TV guide for free. If you pay $30 a year, okay, so the entire year for $30, you get the 14-day, the 2-week TV guide. You can schedule your recordings on 2 separate M1 devices. So that's 4 recordings simultaneously if you wanted to do that. So for $30 a year, I don't think that's a crazy subscription price that they're charging. And that's what's going on with all of ZapperBox. So that's still my go-to solution for DVRing anything that's over the air. ADTH is the other company that has and ATSC 3.0 tuner that works with the DRM encryption. Those are the only two solutions right now, are the Zapper box and the ADTH box. But the ADTH box is single tuner only, and the DVR functionality for that is still in beta and hasn't been officially released, and still has some bugs that they're working out in it. So right this second, you want something that works for everything you might do, it's the Zapper box.
Right. So let's say you want a nerdy, dirt cheap, a little bit difficult, ugly solution because you're only going to record these football games.
Okay.
Or you're only going to record things here and there, just every now and then, and you don't mind some difficulty. So I just double checked. Anybody watching YouTube will have seen me looking down at my keyboard and searching to make sure this is still available. So this is a digital converter box from iView. And it's the 3300 STB. And I just double checked. It's $25 on Amazon.
So
they
it's
have
almost
a newer
a flyer. Give it a try.
Exactly. They have a newer one that's like $35, and I have not examined what the differences are. Now, what you're going to get is a thing that can tune in these 1080i broadcasts on ATSC 1.0. It will record it to storage that you provide and plug into a USB port. So you're a USB stick or a hard drive, however you want to do it. And I'm telling you, this is 100% manual. You're not going to download any TV guides. You're just going to see the channels. It will scan and it will find channels, and you're just going to see the raw channel number. It might not even match what the number of the station says it is.
Right.
So, because a lot of channels are like, hey, we're channel 6. And then if you know what frequency it's actually on, it's paired up with channel 15 or something. So it can be very confusing. So you'll have to scan and you'll have to practice with it. You're going to have to type in the beginning time and the end time like it's an old VCR. However, $25, and the benefit is you can pop the storage off, carry it to a computer, and you can keep it forever. So that's a thing that's hard to do nowadays.
Because that ATSC 1.0 doesn't have copy protection. Once you have that recorded somewhere, you can do with it what you please.
And these are transport stream files .ts, so it's the raw MPEG 2 or just original broadcast, whatever you get on here, it's a raw file. You can go do with it as you please. So it's a fun, different option. I like it because I mostly got this for local television stuff. There's we have what we call Janky News. That's mine and my wife's name for it. It's this dinky little station we have locally in Tuscaloosa. We just call it Janky News because it's kind of cheap. But a lot of times people we know or things about the school system where my wife works, or other local issues. When we were defending a walk bridge next to our neighborhood here, there were stories about that, and we wanted to record. So you could do that with something like this, and you can keep that file and edit it or whatever you want to do. So there's you another option. But trust me, it's finicky. So you need to be ready. It's not easy to use, but if you're only doing it.
There's a touch of you get what you pay for in this instance.
Of course. Definitely you get what you pay for. But if all you need is once in a while to be finicky and manually program a timer to record a program, it'll do that. All right. So moving on to Sasi. So first up, a while ago, Sasi wrote us with a whole bunch of potential ideas for his parents' new backyard audio setup. But we successfully convinced him and them that they will probably be happiest buying a few portable outdoor speakers that they can easily move to any spot in the backyard, including poolside, rather than running lots of buried speaker wires and having to think about amplification and distribution. In the end, Sasi figures they will likely buy several Sonos Move speakers, but they're still going to wire for one pair of outdoor speakers that will be mounted to the side of the house. Given that they might be using Sonos speakers elsewhere, this one pair of speakers mounted outside the house might end up being powered by a Sonos amp. The budget isn't particularly tight or anything, and they want good sound quality, but they also aren't the one pushing for anything particularly fancy for the outdoor setup. So any suggestions for a solid pair of outdoor speakers to mount to the side of the house?
So honestly,
Dayton Audio.
These are pretty hard to beat. Dayton Audio's IO8 And there's like a XTW on the end of those, but the IO8s, if you go looking for those, they're available directly from Parts Express. These go for $175 each, so that's pretty darn affordable in my opinion. They're available in both black and white. As the IO8 name implies, it is an 8-inch woofer in there, so they have pretty good output capabilities, pretty good bass extension. They also have a passive bass radiator on the back, and they are fully IP rated for dust and weather resistance and that, so they're good speakers. These are definitely a top pick by the Wirecutter from Brent Butterworth. He's spoken highly of those particular speakers. So if you're wanting something pretty darn affordable but has the nice output capabilities, work is just a regular 8 ohm load. You have to select that because they can also work on 70 volt or 100 volt systems if you want to. So that's an option too. It's all available via a selector switch on those Dayton Audio IO8 speakers. But that's certainly a top pick that I would be considering. Now, if you are just driving everything off of a Sonos amp, and it's a pretty big backyard that they have apparently, you might be looking for something with kind of top-end efficiency, high sensitivity that very few watts still results in a lot of sound coming out. And of course, there is Klipsch. Klipsch also produces horn-loaded, high-efficiency outdoor speakers as well. I would probably point you to their 8-inch model in this instance. Just like I would with the Daytons there, of also available in a black or a white finish, with weatherproofing on the back there for where the cables go in. Again, just a regular 8 ohm load here. But yeah, feed these about 10 watts and you're getting over 100 decibels out of them. So it's not too much of a problem going on here with these ones. They're quite a bit more expensive, yes. $900 a pair for the RSM 800s. That's the retail price though, so you can definitely find those on sale sometimes a little bit less than that. But yeah, I mean, if the budget really isn't tight, they're pretty nice looking speakers. They are an 8-inch woofer, so they're not tiny. They're pretty big rectangles, but when they're mounted to the outside of your house, that's not going to look out of place. And I can vouch for those. They get nice and loud with not very many watts, and sometimes that's really what you're looking for.
Yeah, if budget's not tight, honestly, I'd go that way. You know me, I'm cheap, so I've got my big Sony Jambox Bluetooth speaker that I carry around now to poolside, and that's just what I use. But yeah, if you don't want to have to lug around a thing, then blast the backyard with those, I would think. Next, they intend to have a media room in this new house. They previously had a fully dedicated theater room with a projection set up in their last place, but they've decided they do not want that same sort of thing again. They still want a very large display and a full theater-like audio system, but they want it to be more of a multi-use space and not completely dark this time. So they are fully decided on using a flat panel display this time. Even an ultra short throw projector isn't going to cut it. And I get that. So there's a certain impracticality with the theater, and if it doesn't match how you want to live life and watch things and enjoy things,
if you found through experience that you're not really using that room very often and the entire room is dedicated to being a theater and nothing else, like I can see it. They're like, no, this time we want to be able to sit down and enjoy movies for sure. That is still a very clear priority for them, but like it's going to be multi-use space. The lights are going to be on. I'm like, I get that. I totally get that.
That's right. So yeah, if most of my viewing was people coming over to watch a football game, we're not going to sit in the dark in a theater. We need to be able to see what we're eating and shoving in our faces, so we need some light on. So they are looking very seriously at the 115-inch TCL QM891G model. Yes, the 115-inch TCL.
It is the biggest consumer flat panel that is available right now. That is not a modular micro LED display that costs over $100,000. Yeah,
it's kind of exciting to hear someone taking this seriously. The $20,000 MSRP is a hurdle for sure, but prices with installation can be negotiated. So if they can land on a price they find accessible, that's almost certainly what they're getting. Wow. Yeah. But I want to know more. You have to tell us about this if this is what happens. But if the price remains too high, no matter what other options are there? Sasi is aware of the 110-inch Hisense UX model, but that has the same sticker price. It's a smaller screen size, and he's a bit gun-shy of Hisense and their quality control. So he isn't too keen on that option. Does that only leave dropping down to a 98-inch model? Oh, no. How are you going to be squinting, right? Does that only leave that as the only option if no form of projection is on the table? Shall we just stop there and update on that part of the question.
Yeah, so I mean, other than spending even more to go to a micro LED display, because the least expensive micro LED displays are larger than the 115-inch, and they're like 3 fairly sizable panels. They're basically like 3 TV bezel-less panels that get merged together, but that's still over $50,000 as the quoted price. So when the goal is to get under 20, I don't see that as a viable alternative going to the micro LEDs. So yeah, other than that, there's nobody else doing greater than 100 inches for less than the $20,000 MSRP type of price tag. So, I mean, there's a couple of options, right? The 98 inches can be downright affordable these days.
That is a wild thing to say.
It is. And
if
I mean,
you
you
had
can
told
get,
me
like,
a dozen years ago that would be a sentence you would speak,
right.
I wouldn't have believed you.
And you can get like flagship quality 98-inch for $4,000 pretty readily.
That is so cool.
You know, that's not the MSRP on TCL's 98-inch QM 852. What are they on? 51? 51, 851.
Okay.
For this year, the 98-incher, but it goes on sale for $4,000 like frequently. And that's flagship quality from that one. So that, you know, doing that plus, I mean, at that point, if you were thinking $10,000 plus, you know, you could get like a motorized mount that can handle the 98-inch screen. Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be motorized, but I'm just saying that the budget could potentially be there, that you could like motorize that thing to extend out from the wall that it's mounted on. You know, that could be an option that just gives you that larger field of view, but doesn't require that the TV always be extended from the wall. You could, of course, do that with a manual extending wall mount for a lot less money. Yeah. But, you know, those types of options exist. So I don't think you have to suffer too much. You know, if you go to the 98-inch. But the other thing I just wanted to mention is there is essentially no question whatsoever that the price on those TCL 115-inch screens is going to come down and like as soon as next year's version of it, because they've been profiling how their newest LCD fabrication plant allows them to cut 2 115-inch or even 2 132-inch panels from a single sheet of mother glass now.
Can you get a 132-inch TV into a house, or do you have to have a double French door?
I mean, they said how they can do a single, I think it was like 168 or something like that. Like theoretically, out of that piece of mother glass, that's the largest single screen size they could cut, but there'd be a bunch of waste left over, so that would be really, really expensive. But the thing was, one of the reasons the 98 inches have come down significantly in price is because they got to the point where on their older existing fabrication lines, they could cut 2 98-inch screens from one piece of mother glass with very little waste left over. Okay. And once they get to that efficiency, it brings the price down. So they're already there, ready to start doing that with the 115s. So if it's not next year, it'll be the year after. The prices on those are going to come down. I have absolutely no doubt of that whatsoever. So if they can wait a while, it's not going to stay $20,000 forever.
That price difference is so great. It would seem to me you could buy the 98-inch TV now and then wait for the price to drop more than the amount of the 98-inch TV, and then get the 115 or the 132 or what the heck else it's going to be. Yeah. That's the way I would go, because with all that money saved, you could bling out the rest of the situation like crazy. Yeah, you're not going to be hurting.
Those are the options.
On the audio side of things, it's mostly going to be up to Sasi as to what they end up installing. They're set on a 5.2.4 configuration, and loud output capability really isn't the priority. So he was thinking he'd set them up with an Onkyo TX NR7100 receiver powering RBH Impression Series on-wall speakers. He's also going to be giving his parents his pair of rhythmic subwoofers that he intends to replace. More on that later. As a bit of an aside, he's been talking to Kenny over at RBH, and he confirmed that their new Impression Series on-wall models can work perfectly fine as in-wall speakers. And since they have manufacturing facilities on site, they can also accommodate some custom requests. So if he would really prefer dogleg attachments for in-wall installation, they can make that happen. It'll cost extra, but it's possible to have it done.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, right? And you can see the direction that they're wanting to go is less dedicated, more subtle, more multi-use, so you're not like you're walking into an only theater kind of space. I get that. Let me see. Lost my space. So Sasi was thinking he'd go with 3 of the 55 IWR speakers across the front, mounted on the front wall as intended. They're the right price with the right output capabilities and form factor that he's looking for on behalf of his parents. As another little aside, we've said how proper design and good engineering can mean an MTM center speaker is not always a problem, despite what might be parroted about MTM center speakers online. Kenny from RBH shared their own measurements of the 55 IWR speaker when used horizontally as a center speaker, and they do show a measured dip in the 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz crossover region between the folded ribbon tweeter and the 2 woofers on either side, but only at plus minus 30 degrees off axis or greater. And even then, it's not that big of a dip, about 4 decibels at worst. The folded ribbon tweeter does measure as having narrower vertical dispersion. So ideally, the tweeters will be close to seated ear height, or you'll aim the speakers by tilting them if they're notably above or below ear level. It all seems pretty reasonable to Sasi. So starting there, is there anything that crops up that we think he might need to reconsider? The seats that matter will all be directly in front of the TV and center speaker, so it's a plus minus 20 degree horizontal spread from the center speaker that matters most.
Yeah, I mean, if you're wanting nice, reasonably affordable, but good-looking, solid, neutral, linear measure, like a pretty darn flat line as far as on-axis frequency response. At that sort of price point, that's also on wall, and a good design that's like fully sealed, so you're not going to have any weird boundary issues or anything like that. I can't think of anything I'd recommend too much more highly than that. It sounds like they're the sort of typical thing where they're saying, we don't really want it that loud, but we still want clarity, which is what a lot of people request. So, I mean, those folded ribbon tweeters that RBH uses, they are a little bit more directional. They do have that narrower vertical dispersion as we would expect just from the geometry. But you get that super fast transient response. It increases their sensitivity and their power handling a little bit. So I think the choice of speakers, and Sasi knows this, but it never hurts to have another pair of eyes, another brain on it just to sort of confirm. But there's nothing I would change about your choice of speakers. The only thing I will say is I might consider an alternative to the Onkyo NR7100 AV receiver, just because it sounded like the room they're putting this in is not small. Like, it's not gigantic, but it's not small. They're not looking for crazy high output levels, so you don't necessarily need the most sensitive and highest power handling speakers ever. But the NR7100 gives you no option for adding external amplification. You must use the 9 built-in amps if you're running a 5.2.4 configuration. It has no pre-outs whatsoever. And I'm just like that, in my mind, if the room is just big enough, if they are sitting far enough away, they're going for this 115-inch display ideally. So this isn't a tiny, tiny setup where you're, sitting within 10 feet or closer of these speakers type of thing. I'm like, I wouldn't mind the possibility of adding some external amplification, maybe. I just wouldn't want to cut off that option entirely from myself. So, a few different things there. One, you could just go up in Onkyo's own lineup if you want to stick with Onkyo. They have the new RZ30, which is very similar to the NR7100, but does have the full set of pre-outs, as well as the option to run direct live bass control if you want to, because it has the independent subwoofer outputs, whereas the NR7100 is an internal Y splitter on its sub-outs. I don't really think that's the case here, but that's the other feature the RZ30 offers. But also the RZ50 that came out at the same time as the NR7100, it's like discounted like crazy. It's not that much more expensive than the NR7100 to go to the RZ50. So that to me is something I would just consider. Like he said all along, his parents are, doing pretty decently well financially. They're not like all the money in the world that we can just spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the theater equipment. But it's like, if we're talking like $150, $200 more, like just to give them that flexibility there, I would consider that. I would consider a receiver upgrade in this case.
That makes sense. Like I said, you can tell they're backing off from the full dedicated home theater, but doesn't mean you don't want a little oomph every now and then.
And you don't want possibility that, like you end up sending a clipped signal to the speakers. You don't want
Right.
to damage anything here. So I'm just like, given the sense I'm getting about the room size, the seating distance and that, I'm like, having that option to add an amplifier, maybe it's just for the front 3 speakers type of thing, but I would like to have that option in this case.
Well, what's great is you can tell Sasi's been listening to this podcast for a long time.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
I think it's awesome. He's doing the analysis in the way that we would do it. Just to complete the thoughts for the floor level speakers, the surrounds will also be RBH Impression Series on walls, but Sasi intends to mount them in wall. And thanks to Kenny's advice, he's very confident they'll easily be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
For the 4 overhead speakers, RBH does offer in-ceiling models with matching folded ribbon tweeters, but they still have wider horizontal dispersion and narrower vertical dispersion. So for Atmos in ceilings, Sasi didn't think that was really the best way to go. Plus, those speakers are priced at almost $1,000 each.
Yeah, that's a bit nuts. More
think
expensive
he's
than
right
any
about
of
this.
the Impression Series speakers. Yeah.
Let's not blow $1. So he's considering some dome tweeter models from RBH, especially if the package price includes a discount that makes it an easy decision. But those are still originally priced at $550 each, and that's before adding rear enclosures. So what about matching the RBH Impression Series on-wall speakers with their folded ribbon tweeters to our go-to Sonance MAG-8, MAG-8 in-ceiling speakers from Best Buy? For Atmos purposes, will those remain good enough and a close enough timbre match? Yes.
Yeah,
I would say, I mean, like right away.
They're both going for quite neutral, linear, no real particular distinctive character to the sound. So for overhead Atmos speaker purposes, like we've said, they just need to be like good speakers. They don't have to be like perfect timbre match speakers. They can't, I don't think it's worth it to put in genuinely crappy speakers in your ceiling. I want to at least get them to where I'm like, okay, that's good. That's a good speaker. It's a neutral linear speaker. You're not going to notice any sort of timbre mismatch that way. So I say yes, they will absolutely match just fine with those Sonance Mag-8 speakers.
Yeah. So right this second, they're listed at full MSRP over at Best Buy, but another sale will surely come along, at which point they'll be a quarter of the price of the RBH in ceilings.
Yeah.
And their rear enclosures are readily available again as well. Go with the Mag-8s. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. I'm pretty darn happy and confident recommending that. Like you say, if RBH cuts you a deal where it doesn't end up being any more expensive to go with their own in-ceilings, then sure, why not? I mean, it's going to be great all around. But yeah, if the price is going to be that different for 4 of the Mag-8s, I would surely do that. Yeah,
It's not
right
like
this
you're going to
second.
be. It's not as though you're going to be watching a movie thinking, "Wow, it sounds like there's a blanket on the ceiling. This is terrible." That's not going to happen. So,
but yeah, we got Black Friday coming up. Keep an eye out there at Best Buy. I'm quite certain those Sonance Mag series speakers are going to be on sale again.
all right, Sasi has some more planning going on here. As we mentioned in the news, thanks to Sasi, there's that new 555IW and 555IWR model that's been added to the RBH Impression Series lineup. In all honesty, how does that design actually make sense? I don't know. He's convinced at this point that a horizontal MTM center speaker can work as long as it's been properly designed, but having 2 tweeters that far apart, if you use it as a single speaker with 2 tweeters and 3 woofers for maximum output and power handling, can that honestly work without any issues with one of the woofers in between the 2 tweeters? See, he's on track. He's been listening.
Yeah.
And then in the second use case, where you separate the 2 pairs of binding posts and use the 555IW as essentially a 55IW main speaker and a 5IW split center speaker that happen to share one enclosure, how is that any better than just having 1 pair of 55IW main left and right speakers and using a phantom center? How does having what amounts to a separate pair of 5IW speakers on either side of your display acting as a split center speaker perform any better than just a phantom center? What's he missing? Not much.
So I mean, that second part first, the only thing that's going on there is it gives you a separate trim level that you can adjust, right? It gives you a center speaker trim level where if you want to boost the center speaker channel specifically, now you have a physical speaker connected to that, or 2 speakers, in fact, split across on either side. But that's really all it is, right? You are still relying on the phantom center phenomenon you're still relying on that 100% to give you the sense that the sound is coming from the middle of the screen. If you are sitting to the outside of the left or the right speaker, having a split center like that isn't going to sound any better than a regular phantom center from your main left and right speakers. You still need to be sitting between those speakers, ideally equidistant, ideally the main prime seat right between those seats, to get that center channel effect. But yeah, it just gives you the separate trim level. That's really what it's about. While giving you the convenience and the aesthetics of a single box that you've mounted on either side of your TV, this one speaker enclosure. Right. But yeah, using it as a, let's say, horizontal center, where you have a woofer tweeter design. Now, it will for sure show up in measurements. Right. If you do measurements, you are going to see comb filtering. You are going to see lobing. That is going to show up in the measurements unquestionably. If you have two tweeters physically separated that much, there are going to be sound wave interactions, and it's going to result in comb filtering. If you have three woofers with the tweeters in between the sets of three woofers, you are going to have lobing in the crossover region. It's going to show up in the measurements. So, what's being relied upon there is, just the claims that we really don't hear comb filtering unless you are swaying your head kind of rhythmically back and forth as you listen. Because, I've heard comb filtering, but I have to be physically moving my head in a pretty steady rhythmic fashion to hear comb filtering if I'm kind of sitting still.
I'm a fidgety person. There's no doubt there's going to be times during a movie where I literally am moving my head around. So I don't think I would like that.
Yeah, it's unequivocally going to be there in the measurements. The audibility of it is going to matter a little bit on how you listen and that. But yeah, this wouldn't be my first choice. It wouldn't be my first choice to design a center speaker this way. I don't think they really intended it to be that. I don't, like I say, I during the news, I was like, I'm going to struggle a bit to find the use case where I'm going to be recommending this particular speaker model. So I'm there with you, Sasi. I don't think it makes all this. I don't think it's a no-brainer where it makes all the sense in the world, but the notion of I truly cannot physically place a center speaker anywhere in my setup, but I still want to be able to independently adjust the trim level. There you go. That's the use case.
That's it. Lastly, he's intending to build himself a pair of 18-inch DIY subs to replace his rhythmic subs so he can give the rhythmics to his parents. He's settled on using Stereo Integrity HST 18MK2 drivers, which are rated for 2 ohm impedance with 2,000 watt RMS power handling. Again, I'd like to hear that story, how that goes. So that has him on the hunt for lots of watts, but at a low price. The top recommended rack-mountable amplifier for these particular drivers is over $3,000, and Sasi doesn't want to pay that much. Of course not.
It's as simple as that.
That makes sense. I would like to pay less than $3,000. So, one of the folks at Stereo Integrity pointed him to a Chinese brand that sells via AliExpress, but Sasi did a bunch of reading about them online and found too many complaints about their quality control and downgraded internal components for him to feel comfortable going with them. Okay, there's the other side of the coin, right?
Yep. So lots of watts, not very many dollars, but he's like, maybe too good to be true. I found enough people saying kind of too good to be true. Yeah,
probably what it is. He's come across a number of people who have been happy using CVR brand DJ amps. Now there's a way to do it. And then the stalwart Behringer amps are always a potential option. Behringer for me, I don't know.
Lots of watts, not a ton of money.
I know.
That's what's going on.
And I've had Behringer equipment before. I've had like a compressor and a mixer, and I can tell that it's cheaper. I can, but that's compressor and mic mixer, so that's a different product. So I shouldn't, comment on everything.
What I will say unequivocally about those Behringer amplifiers, even if you're mounting them in an equipment rack that's outside of your home theater room, you're still going to want to manually modify their fans because for some reason they seem to have intentionally chose the loudest cooling fans they can possibly find anywhere. Like we've got lots of cooling fans for computers and other things that use that size of fan these days. that are not very loud or darn near silent, and they seem to have gone out of their way to find the loudest one they could possibly put in there. I don't know why.
Yep. I've just had not the best experience.
Yeah,
with
I mean,
Behringer,
it's a
but
pretty easy modification. There's not much to it. You can get like a Noctua or a B silent PC fan and just swap the thing in there. It's not that hard, but out of the box, you're going to need to modify that thing. Like I say, even if it's outside your room, you can hear those fans go, and they make a noise.
But I should very clearly say that my opinion of Behringer is formed from mixers and compressors and not.
But they're meant to like go underneath the stage at a stadium, where you're not going to hear it from the audience. They did not care how loud the cooling fans are.
Right. So what kind of bugs Sasi is that none of these preamp Class D super high wattage amplifiers actually seem to hit their rated specs. The Behringer amps were thoroughly tested and measured, and they basically produced about 55% of the wattage numbers they were claiming on their spec sheet. And then some of these other brands have numbers that are even more inflated than that.
Yeah.
So he knows we aren't super into the DIY subwoofer building scene. But do we have any thoughts to just bounce ideas off of in this case? Do we have especially other amp ideas?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of how are they claiming that on the spec sheet? No, they're not adhering to any of those like FTC rules or even the European rules that have different parameters that allow you to make the numbers look bigger. They're not adhering to any of those. They are going for for a millisecond in time at one frequency, typically 1 kilohertz, with unlimited distortion levels, how many watts can come out of this amplifier, right? Like it's a true maximum possible for a split second in time.
If we wire it to a lightning rod on the clock tower and a storm comes through, how much wattage do we get out?
Which is why even at 1% total harmonic distortion plus noise, which at mid-range frequencies is very, very audible. Even at those, it's like, half of the wattage that's claimed on the spec sheet of any of these is about what can actually be output from these amplifiers. Now, the thing is, that kind of goes for that subwoofer driver you're looking at too. When they're like, this is a 2,000 watt RMS, 4,000 watt peak, but 2 ohm impedance, dual voice coil design, like that's what you're talking about. It's like, no, you're not sustaining 2,000 watts continuously into that subwoofer driver. That's not what we're talking about. That is the maximum power handling, which is not that different from the peak amplifier power output.
Basically, it's before it explodes. That's
right. Now,
that's that
genuinely as a 2 ohm load, because I mean, it's kind of meant to be in a dual subwoofer driver arrangement where you can wire them in series to create a 4 ohm load, or at least at the very least wire together the 2 voice coils in series to give you a more manageable load for any amplifier. It's like, you need maybe about 1,000 watts. You need about a kilowatt into a 4 ohm load. That's the type of amplifier that you're kind of looking for. So once you get to there, well, now you don't have to go wildly expensive to get some very good solid amplifiers. The ones that I'm typically going to look at in cases like this are from Crown, which are not the cheapest. They are not the absolute cheapest, but you can absolutely look at like the XTI series. That's the Class D high wattage series from Crown. Now, it's not going to be under $1,000, but it's not going to be over $2,000. You're going to be in the sort of $1,500, $1,700 type of price range to get their like 2 by 1,000 watts into 4 ohm type of amplifier. I think that's the 4002 model, which is claiming 4,000 watts peak, but like that was the peak power handling of the driver as well. So they're a match made in heaven, like realistically, that's a really good match. But, he was kind of looking at some of these alternatives that are close to $1,000, that type of thing. So, GSG, they're like kit based, right? You can buy a kit subwoofer that you assemble. They've done all the work of picking out the components for you, and they flat pack the cabinet so that you can assemble it yourself. But they've done a lot of that legwork for you, and they have their recommended amplifiers. And one that they would point you to is from the company PV.
There's
their
another
IPR2.
big DJ brand name.
Yeah. big DJ brand. The IPR 27500, that's the top end one, but that's like under $1,200. You can buy it directly from GSG. They're an authorized reseller. And that's got, that similar type of power rating as the Crown amp that I just talked about at a lower price point. So one of those I'd probably look at. I don't think we're breaking the bank here. It's not the absolute least expensive like that Chinese brand that you weren't too keen on, but it's nowhere near $3,000, not even close. It's definitely under half the price of the $3,000 ones, and it's got appropriate wattage levels for the driver that you're talking about. So I think one of those will get the job done for you.
Yeah, I think so. Once you get to that wattage level and that kind of power, you can't skimp. You're going to need
you don't want to skimp, but you also
yeah.
don't want to go so like actually thinking you need 4,000 sustained watts just because the driver says that's its peak power handling. Like, no, we don't have to do that.
Right. I like the PV idea. So next questioner is Infinite Gary. Hi, Gary. I'm here. Infinite Gary has a question. So he came across a recent article that spotlights the brand Maxell, as in the old cassettes that we used to use, and goes through some of the history and now supposed resurgence in audio cassettes. Here's a Maxell audio cassette right next to me right now,
right.
Rob.
Look at that.
Look at that. Like,
That's exactly the one.
If you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding it in front of the camera. I wonder
That's
if it'll focus on that and not my face. Maybe so.
Right at the end, I think it just got there.
It got it there just for a split second. Yeah, what can you do? For his part, Gary has a fully restored Nakamichi RX505 recording tape deck, and he says he's made use of it every week for the past 10 years. Really, 10 years. Every week, Gary is using cassettes.
That's what he says. I'll believe him. Why not? It's Gary. It's entirely possible.
I definitely don't use cassettes every week, but I have used them in the past few months in my older car that I still need to sell. It has a tape deck, and there's something super fun about popping in a tape in an older car and driving around like that. I actually got a tape from the thrift store, a homemade cassette, and all it said on the cassette was good old jammin' music.
Oh, all right.
Somebody had actually hand labeled the cassette with the words good old jammin' music. And you know what? I got that cassette. There was some good songs on there. I actually knew most of this. It was like early to mid 80s kind of dance, funk, and a little bit of rock. I'm like, you know what? That's good old jammin' music.
Sounds right to me.
It's my best thrift store find ever. So he's got his Nakamichi. For their part, Maxell never actually stopped manufacturing cassettes entirely. Now they only make the cheap ones. And now they are actually ramping up production and deploying some marketing campaigns, including the return of their blown away guy as demand for the old format increases. The article describes how the cost of vinyl production has made it prohibitively expensive for small artists to offer records for their fans to purchase, but cassettes are still cheap, so it allows almost anyone to offer an analog physical format release. So that's a big part of the appeal, along with the nostalgia, of course, for returning to the format. See, I don't know if it's that cheap to get any kind of mass production, but if you want to buy a few decent tape decks and just hand make like 100 of them.
And that's quite a bit what people are doing. That's
right.
It. Yeah.
That would be okay, but you're not getting like 1,000 to sell. That's not going to happen. What do we think? For Gary, cassettes never went away, but is this entirely a fad? Could cassettes see as much of a resurgence as vinyl has? Does it have that kind of longevity? So I can answer this one. Is it a fad? Yes. Could cassettes see as much of a resurgence? No. Does it have that kind of longevity? Absolutely not. Now, if you mean longevity as a fad, that's one thing. Do you mean longevity as a format where you can keep listening to it and it works in 30 years? If you take care of it, yeah, actually. I have cassettes and I have videotapes that work easily 30 or 40 years later, and they're fine. But then again, I've been kind of paranoid, and they've always been in an air-conditioned house, never sitting in a hot car for very long, and I often will purposely rewind or fast forward them tails out or whatever, So you can make them last a very, very long time, but there's just no way, because cassettes can sound amazing, but the vast majority of equipment that ever used cassettes did not sound amazing.
Right.
And to make it sound amazing, it does require a more expensive cassette deck. You can't just go out and buy like a barely working $40 unit at the thrift store. You're going to want something in the $100 used range. You're going to find like a Pioneer or a Sony or, brand names you've heard of, a JVC. I don't know. There's all kinds of brand names that could play a decent cassette, but it takes more money and more trouble and more care to make it sound in any way as good as even an MP3. And that's just a fact.
in their way, I mean, as far as the niche of a niche group of audiophiles who are going back into cassettes, like that's the appeal, is how difficult and finicky it is. That's actually genuinely the appeal to that group of people. Because the thing is, so look, I mean, I don't think that vinyl records sound better than CDs.
They do not.
Pretty much full stop. Yeah. But there are certainly many people who do, and I can absolutely point at individual instances of a vinyl record release that sounds superior to the only CD version that was ever created of that same album or something like that. I will absolutely say, oh yeah, the record vinyl version of that album sounds way better than the only CD of that same album that was ever released.
Especially if they took the master recording that was intended for vinyl and just slapped it onto a CD.
That's right.
That will sound terrible. I think
there's a bunch of albums that existed in vinyl format that never existed in CD format. So that is absolutely a case where if you want a physical release, the vinyl was the only game in town. So for those reasons, I can 100% get on board with people having vinyl collections. But there is the argument out there, whether I agree with it or not, of the people who just believe that the vinyl format sounds superior to CDs. There is nobody who is going to argue that cassette tapes inherently sound better than any other format. No, that was just never the thing about. Yeah, that was never what they were about at any point in history. It was that they were more convenient to play in your car than a vinyl record. That was for sure.
And they allowed you to get copies of music.
Yes. So that's what that was all about. So I think it's mostly nostalgia. I think that's the lion's share of what's going on is nostalgia. But I can see for like the artists who are like, I want to have a physical release. I don't just want it to be a CD that I burned. Like, it's kind of cool. It's kind of kitschy to have something that's analog. It truly is analog, right? You have an actual analog release. But yeah, pressing vinyl these days is kind of expensive if you're a very small audience that you're selling to. So I can see it's kind of cool in that way. I don't think that's enough to create an actual resurgence and grow a market. And there's the people who love that it is outright difficult to make it sound as good as it possibly can, and that's the appeal of it. But I don't see cassettes going anywhere close to what vinyl has done in terms of resurgence, and it's not going to get anywhere close to like supplanting CDs or something ridiculous.
But I don't want to dissuade someone from having fun with the technology.
For sure.
But if you want to try it, I'm telling you, you're diving down a rabbit hole, and you're either finding someone who refurbs them and buying a refurbished one, or maybe you want to get into opening that up and replacing belts and checking capacitors and making sure the motor's turning at the right speed and all that kind of stuff. If that kind of techie stuff sounds fun, go for it. There's something exciting about, wow, look how good this cassette actually sounds. I can't
doing
believe
hands-on, and being able to actually make genuine and audible differences in things as opposed to the imagined differences of so much of autophilia. Yeah.
So if playing with it is most of the fun, have fun with cassettes. If you just want something to sound good, just, get an uncompressed digital file.
Yes, that's right.
That's all you gotta do. Gary came across a listing for a 1.5 meter, 120 volt, 15 amp aftermarket power cable from a brand called Wire World. A real steal of a deal priced at $2,030.
Had to have the extra 30 on there.
Yes.
Couldn't just be 2,000 even.
$2,030. Since the quote regular price is shown right there as being $2,900. Wow. A savings of $870. Oh, my goodness.
Almost as though numbers are arbitrary.
What a deal for a power cable. The description says it is made from OCC 7N ultra pure silver conductors and connectors, and that with design and materials of the highest level, this cable produces the richest timbre and most dramatic dynamic expression of any power cord. Nothing else comes close to producing sound quality so pristine, so impressively open and airy. Of course it's airy. The flexible flat design of the Wire World Platinum Electra 7 power cord allows it to bend and coil easily.
Even though it's pure silver, huh?
Yeah, interesting. Even
very
though it's pure
brittle,
silver.
Very brittle, inflexible material.
You're thinking too hard, Rob. It bends and coils easily. It's very sexy and alluring. Fair to say it's all just marketing BS? Yes! Yes, it's all marketing BS. That's not how any of this works. Or is there anything in any of their claims that might actually improve what we hear over a properly made stock power cord? No.
No.
A power cord is a power cord, unless it is broken on the inside.
This power cord is much more likely to fail being made from silver. Much more likely to fail.
I want to cut it open and see if it's made from silver. I don't know if I believe them, because that would be really hard to do.
They did make a mention of some silver-clad copper in there, which one would imagine, just from a material science point of view, if it's not going to fail, you want it to be copper inside. But no, this is utterly stupid, utterly ridiculous. If your power cable is changing the timbre of the sound, I don't know what the heck is going on in there.
It's not. It's basically not doing
1.5 meters. $2,000.
It's just, if you have money to set on fire and that sounds good to you,
send it to me.
Yeah, really? Let us set it on fire. We'll do fun stuff with it. So moving on from that ridiculous product, Gary can recall how smoking used to be not just allowed, but very common in movie theaters. Wow, yeah. And some movies themselves depict this time with heavy smoke filling the theater that's being shown on screen, and these swirls of smoke clearly illuminated by the beam of light from the projector. Didn't that mess up the projected image? Yes! Smoking messes up everything. How did anybody see the movie screen clearly back in those days? You just had to hope there were less smokers in the theater. And you had to hope they were sitting up front instead of in the back right in front of the projector. Like, yeah, everything you're saying is correct. Smoking is terrible. Don't do it. It screws up you and everything around you. I remember my late father's TV screen one time. I went over there and cleaned it and clean. I was like, this looks really dark. I cleaned it and showed him the rag. I purposely used a white rag, cleaned it with Windex, and it was a brown rag. And I'm like, this is in your lungs, Mr. Dad. He didn't listen to me. So there you go. But yeah, all those things are true.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, the movies weren't clear. They were not HD, let alone ultra high definition back in the day. They absolutely were not.
So there you go. Let's move on to Jason and see if he has questions about products that matter. First up, Jason previously asked about ATSC 3.0, aka Next Gen TV, network tuner solutions, since he already uses an HD Home Run ATSC 1.0 network tuner, but the HD Home Run Next Gen TV network tuners don't support the DRM encrypted channels, not yet at least. Yeah, and that's the whole reason they want to change the broadcast standard for real. We suggested the Zapper Box solution, as mentioned before, but one thing that Jason didn't mention in his previous email is that using an app on his Apple TV 4K to view over-the-air broadcasts and recordings is a very high priority to him. So he doesn't want my little digital converter box that's $25.
Nope. No app for the Apple TV 4K for that little guy.
Nope, not a thing. It's got a funky little remote. Good luck. So for the time being, he's decided to just stick with his ATSC 1.0 version, not worry too much about missing out on the HDR of some NFL broadcast. That's still going to be very rare. And also, that's going to be carried as streaming. So hopefully one day soon, there will be a viable network tuner solution with full DRM support, or better yet, enough pressure is somehow applied to remove the ATSC 3.0 encryption and DRM altogether. Yes, sir. That's what I'm shooting for. Don't buy. I'm not buying anything that's broadcast with encryption. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to buy a product like that, because that is the public airwaves and they're supposed to be for the public, and it shouldn't be about subscribing or having to pay for something that's over the air. If you can't support it with commercials, too bad.
But you just have to have an internet connection that can look up the encryption keys. And
not doing it. I know. Not doing it. I'm not buying anything that does it, and I just won't watch it. So that's how it goes. Even, I know it sounds crazy, like I'm paying for streaming. So it's not about paying. It's about the difference in the product. It's public airwaves.
It's certainly not required on a technical level to make the image and sound appear. They're, in fact, adding it after the fact. It wasn't part of the original spec for Next Gen TV when it was when it really was just ATSC 3.0. It wasn't in there. That was added later. They wanted that copy protection.
The more I look into it, and like I said before in this podcast about how you can use different codecs even with ATSC 1.0, the more I realize this is not really to improve anything for anyone.
Yeah.
Maybe the mobile devices, but very few people are asking for that. So on to other topics.
It is.
Yes. His Panasonic ZT65 plasma TV finally started giving up the ghost. Wow. He had been using a 77-inch LG CX OLED in his home theater while the Panasonic Plasma was in his living room. So he decided to move the CX into the living room and got himself a new 83-inch C4 OLED for the home theater. Excellent.
Nice.
Very nice upgrades all around.
Yeah.
His home theater includes a 5.2.4 Atmos speaker configuration, and he uses a Yamaha RX A8A, a very difficult model number to say.
Tough to say out loud.
An RX A8A receiver for the 4 Atmos speakers. Yamaha continues to refer to them as presence speakers because Yamaha is weird. The front presence speakers can be configured as front height, overhead, or Dolby enabled, and the rear presence speakers can be configured as rear height, overhead, or Dolby enabled. Physically speaking, according to Dolby's diagrams, Jason's front presence speakers would be the closest to being top middles, just going by angles. But when he ran YPOW, that's the room correction for Yamaha, it automatically set them as being front heights. As far as he can tell, just listening to his system, he's getting satisfying Atmos effects. Good, stop there. Good. But should he manually change the setting for his front presence speakers to overhead? No, you just said you're getting satisfying Atmos effects. The Yamaha manual mentions that if you only have 2 Atmos speakers, you should put them directly above your seats, right where Dolby says top middles should go, and then configure them as overhead rather than front heights. But it doesn't clearly say what to do when you also have a pair of rear height speakers. It only mentions having front heights and rear heights, both mounted high up on the walls, or having overhead front presence and overhead rear presence, both mounted on the ceiling. What if you have what Dolby would call top middles and rear heights like he has? Again, you know what I'm going to say. If it's working, you stop. You've got perfect Atmos if it's working and you like it.
You don't. I mean, you don't need to change it. That's the bottom line. You don't need to change it, because what really matters is that you have a front versus a rear. You have a left versus a right. The rest of the steering of that doesn't make a whole lot of difference whether they're labeled as front heights and rear heights or front presence overhead, rear presence overhead. It doesn't really make much difference at all. If you did because he's got a high-end enough AV receiver from Yamaha that it does the 3-dimensional. They actually let you move the included measurement microphone around on a little stand that they give you that gives you like 3 locations in azimuth. So you don't move the stand, but you just move the little included microphone onto these 3 little seats on this included stand.
On the stand, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
In azimuth, and then a 4th one on a little elevated height stick to get elevation angle measurements. And if you did all that and your speakers are like, pretty close to overhead, just a little bit in front of you, which is within the spec for Dolby top middles, can be a little bit in front of you, just not as in front of you as top fronts or front heights would be. So it's like, if you did the whole 3-dimensional measurement thing and it still labeled them as front heights, I'm a little bit surprised because it's supposed to be able to measure those angles. But effectively, it really doesn't make a lick of difference. So I would 100% leave the labels alone. It's really not going to change anything.
Yeah, man. If it's working and you like it, that's a good Atmos result. So moving on, along with his new 83-inch LG C4 OLED and his Yamaha A8A receiver, he also has an Oppo UDP-203 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He likes to watch live concert Blu-rays sometimes. Most of those discs include both a 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound mix and also a dedicated 2.0 uncompressed LPCM mix. You can typically choose which one you want to listen to from the Blu-ray discs menu. But recently, when he's tried selecting the 2.0 uncompressed LPCM soundtrack, no sound actually comes out of his speakers. If he goes back into the disc menu and selects the 5.1 DTS MA or Dolby True HD, or sometimes uncompressed 5.1 or 7.1 LPCM soundtrack, that plays just fine. And the video is always there. It's only the dedicated uncompressed 2.0 channel LPCM soundtracks that end up being totally silent for some reason. Even stranger, he tried having the HDMI pass-through option enabled in the Yamaha, so when he put the Yamaha into standby, the video and audio both get passed along to the TV, and the TV can just use its own built-in speakers at that point. Doing that and selecting the 2.0 channel LPCM soundtrack on the disc worked. The 2.0 soundtrack played just fine, coming out of the TV's built-in speakers, passing through the Yamaha receiver in standby mode along the way. If he tries just playing a regular CD in his Oppo, the Yamaha receiver plays that perfectly fine. And throughout all of this, he only uses the Yamaha's straight listening mode, which is just supposed to play any given audio format exactly the way it is, no upmixing. But unlike the pure direct mode, wipe-out room correction and bass management can still be applied, which is what he wants. So, any ideas? Could it maybe just be a new firmware bug in the Yamaha? A very specific use case. So he's got Blu-rays of concerts that have 5.1 and 7.1 and 2.0 LPCM.
Yeah, separate soundtracks. You choose that in the disc menu before you hit play, or go back to the disc menu to change that.
So let's just say 2.0 is important to him. He wants to hear it.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
This is a bit confusing, especially in that straight decoding mode. I would say, what happens if you do, just temporarily for the sake of troubleshooting, try the pure direct listening mode, because I'm wondering if something in the processing there, whether it be wipeout or whether it be the bass management or attempting to apply some upmixing or something like that. Like, what happens if you do pure direct? Because is the signal coming out of the Oppo and making it to the Yamaha in a way that is compatible? One thing that's involved here is sampling rate and bit depth. Because the Yamaha mentions right in its manual that it will support all the way up to 24, or actually up to 32-bit 192 kilohertz.
Wow, okay.
But the Oppo, I'm actually thinking it might be a setting in the Oppo that's what's going on here, because the Oppo has the ability, I think, to like convert in its own audio processing to like 384 if you want to. So I'm like, did that maybe get check marked at some point? When it's outputting 2-channel LPCM, is it maybe being upsampled inside of the Oppo before it's getting sent out, and somehow that's messing things up? I'm more suspicious of the settings in the Oppo than I am of the settings in the Yamaha, to be honest.
When you use the source direct on a Yamaha, it should just work.
Yeah. The other thing that could be going on is the secondary audio setting for Blu-rays. Because that definitely messes things up when your only connection is an HDMI connection. Because it sounds like if he's sending an encoded format, right? DTS HD master audio, Dolby True HD, that's playing fine. He goes to the 2-channel uncompressed LPCM where there's no codec applied, and that's what ends up going silent. So that can have to do with that secondary audio setting, because the bit stream output only works if secondary audio is off in a Blu-ray player. I'm more suspicious of your audio settings inside your Oppo. If you're doing any conversion inside of the Oppo of any kind, right? Where it's like it's doing the decoding inside of the player and only sending out multi-channel PCM, or if it's that upsampling option and you're, unbeknownst to you, were upsampling things to 384 and that's not compatible with your Yamaha or 256. Yeah, those settings are there in the Oppo, so I'm more suspicious of that. That's what I would check.
Okay, there you go. Let's move on to Brad and see if we can get another question in here before.
Yeah, a question or two. See, before our 1 o'clock stop time. Here we got 13 minutes still.
Okay, yeah, we can do. We can see if we can help Brad in 13 minutes. Brad has an SVS PB2000 Pro subwoofer and an Onkyo RZ50 AV receiver. He's using Dirac Live for automatic calibration and room correction. He's wondering, is it better to lower the gain, the volume setting in the subwoofer itself, and then raise the subwoofer trim level in the AV receiver, or vice versa, or does it really not matter at all? That is just a good old-fashioned audio question. I like that one. Yeah.
So, I mean, SVS, for their part, they've always recommended trying to have the volume knob on the subwoofer up kind of as high as you can. That's always been their approach. It shouldn't make much audible difference at all, to be honest, because I mean, we're just talking about, are you applying more gain or are you applying more actual amplification? But for their part, they're like, okay, send in the weaker signal level, and then we trust that our amplification is very, very clean. Whereas, if you're applying a positive gain stage in your preamplifier, maybe you have a noisy preamplifier or something like that. So that's always been their approach. The only thing I would argue is if you're using any sort of automatic signal sensing, right? Like if you let your subwoofer go into standby and then it waits for it to, detect that there's a signal coming, then very often that needs to just be at a certain threshold. Yeah. And you end up having to bump up the trim level, even if that means having to turn down the volume knob of the subwoofer itself to get the levels appropriate. So if you're not using any signal sensing, though, I mean, ultimately it shouldn't make much difference. Because the notion that you're going to have a noisy preamp these days, it's not very common.
Pretty unlikely. My first thought, my instinct is always to send a higher signal to a device that's going to amplify.
Yeah, as long as the signal's
higher
clean.
signal, as long as it's clean and not being distorted by being pumped up too high.
There is another thing there, which is that the SVS subs, like they're basically rated to reach their full maximum output power with a 2-volt RMS preamp signal. And there's a lot of AV receivers that if you turn the trim level all the way up, it's sending out like 4 volts RMS, which at that point is a clipped signal as far as the amplifier is concerned. So that can be one of the reasons why they don't want you to turn the trim level up, way too high, because you can actually be sending a signal that's higher than the necessary signal to
surely a mainstream Onkyo kind of receiver is going to send out just a bog standard 2-volt thing, wouldn't we think?
At its nominal setting, yeah. But if you turn that all the way up to its plus 12, that could be a 3.5 or a 4 volt preamp setting coming out of there now.
It wouldn't hurt anything if you tried it both ways, right? Like high gain, low output, and then the opposite. Just try it 2 different ways. If you don't hear anything different, just put them both in the middle.
Yeah, but I'm kind of like, if I am using signal sensing, I just want the signal high enough coming out of the preamp output that it's high enough to trigger that signal sensing. Because I'm not at that point I'm not going to go to like, well, SVS said to turn the volume knob up higher and turn the trim level down, but now my signal sensing doesn't work. That's not the solution. Get the signal sensing working, and that's good enough.
So I guess the answer is it doesn't really matter if everything's working well, but middle of the road is probably the best bet on everything.
You kind of want to about nominal, yeah.
The Onkyo RZ50 comes with Dirac, and you can run it using the measurement microphone that comes along with the receiver, which is what he's doing at first. But you also have the option of using your own USB measurement microphone, such as the UMIK1, the UMIC 1, that is specifically mentioned and recommended. So he's considering getting one of those. That UMIC 1 comes with a calibration file that is unique to each individual UMIC 1 unit. It's supposed to make programs like Room EQ Wizard apply some offsets that are unique to your specific UMIC 1 so that your measurements are closer to perfectly accurate and neutral. Yes. Mini DSP, the makers of UMIC 1, supply both an on-axis and a 90-degree off-axis calibration file, and you can upload those files in Dirac as well to give you more accurate measurements. The instructions say to point the tip of the UMIC 1 straight up at the ceiling and then use the 90-degree calibration file to take your measurements. And naturally, that makes sense for all of your floor-level speakers since they'll all be pretty close to 90 degrees from the tip of the UMIC 1, when the mic and all of your floor-level tweeters are all close to seated ear level. But what about your overhead speakers? Like in his case, he has a pair of top-middle speakers, so those are almost directly above the microphone. Should he switch the calibration file to the on-axis version rather than the 90-degree version? How would continuing to use the 90-degree version affect the readings for the overhead speakers? That's a logical question right there.
It is.
Aiming right directly up at it. You could point it to the front and set it to 90 degrees.
Yeah. The option to do that is a little bit more finicky than I think anyone is honestly going to do, because you're in the midst of the measurement process, and now you're going to have to go back and change the calibration file on the microphone, which might force you to reset all the gain settings and everything like that again, which is way more finicky than anyone is doing. So most people are certainly doing a set it and forget it. I would venture to say most people aren't even bothering to upload either of the calibration files, because it isn't honestly like utterly necessary in order to get it, because it's more about comparative levels than it is absolute levels. I mean, to a certain extent, when you're talking EQ, there's some amount of absolute levels that we are worried about a bit, especially if you're very, very persnickety about drawing your own target curve and you want it to match absolutely perfect to the target curve that you've drawn. But yes, by and large, people are absolutely just leaving one calibration file or no uploaded calibration file and taking all the measurements with the microphone set up the same in every instance. The speakers are not directly on axis to the microphone. They are still to the left and the right at the very least. So they are off axis from the tip of the microphone pointing straight up at the ceiling. So yeah, my general answer is I wouldn't worry about it too much. I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't go through the hassle of going all the way back through, reloading a new calibration file and coming all the way back, because it is not an on-axis measurement. It's never an on-axis measurement. You're never
it's never
the
straight at the center of the speaker.
I guess unless it's Oro and you have a voice of God that is truly directly above the microphone. That would be the only one.
Right. So, would we like to try to answer Kevin?
I'd like to try to do as many as we're able to, so you let me know when we have to stop.
Oh, well, I thought you were the one with a hard out.
It's not a hard out. No, I just want to aim for around 1 o'clock. Pretty close to it.
Okay, all right. We could probably get a couple more folks here. Yeah. All right, Kevin has a question. So, Rob watches shows while wearing headphones sometimes, right?
That is true, I do.
Yeah, okay. Rob mentioned doing so when he watched episode 5 of The Penguin. Yeah.
Yep, I sure did.
So, which headphones does Rob use? Kevin tends to reach for his Sony MDR 7506. Those are very good.
Nice.
Any reason he should change? Why did Rob decide to use whichever headphones he uses specifically? Listen, I love some Sony headphones. All I do for the past umpteen years, I've been using, what are these? MDR V900 kind of DJ headphones.
Okay.
I love them so much. I've had them for umpteen years. I just keep changing out the pads. So I love me some Sony headphones. So there you go. I would say stick with what you got. But yeah, what led you to what you use, Rob?
Right. Yeah. I mean, to answer that part, I don't think there's any particular reason you should change if you're happy with what you're using. The ones I'm using at the moment are Sennheiser's HD599 headphones. There are multiple things that I really, really like about these headphones, but number one about them is just their physical comfort on my head. They are very, very, very comfortable headphones that I can wear for hours and hours and hours if I want to, and they never become uncomfortable or overly hot. They're an open back design. I am always wearing eyeglasses, so closed back where it has to form a seal doesn't work too well against the stem of my glasses. These being open back design, it doesn't make very much difference.
Okay. For a second there, you froze up and I thought something terrible happened to my internet here.
Okay, we're good. The clamping force on these headphones is just enough to keep them nicely seated. There's no way I could do anything active while wearing these, but the clamping force is kind of light on these, so that's more comfortable again for the long wearing and for having the glasses on with them pressed against the stems there. I mean, the sound quality on the Sennheiser, the whole HD 500 series, I really have liked the sound quality all along. I do wish there was a little bit more bass extension and output, but you're just not going to get that from an open back headphone. And what they are producing is nice and accurate, and that's what I favor the most. Then the other thing is just logistically, they come with a nice long 11-foot cable with a 1/4-inch jack on the end that plugs into an AV receiver really nicely, so I don't have to get any separate or extension headphone cord for it to work really nicely in the setup. It's got that nice length of cord with the jack that I already need, so I don't need any adapter, I don't need any different cable. So it's mostly all logistic reasons. Plus, I do like the sound quality very much, but I'd be very happy with the sound quality of the Sony 7506s that you're using. I'd have no complaints about the sound quality, but wearing comfort or cord length or whatever like that could be enough reason. And the HD599s are only $150 on Amazon, so they're not breaking the bank either.
You know, I don't think I've ever watched a movie with headphones.
Oh, really?
In my whole life. I don't think I ever have. I can't think of a situation. I don't know. Interesting. I should try it sometime and see what that feels like. I don't think it would feel right to me. Kind of makes me want to do it.
I mean, my whole thing is I'm in an apartment. I try to be a very considerate neighbor. So anytime we're getting into the later evening, but I want to watch something, I'll put on the headphones instead. If I'm watching, I try to watch my movies at 3 in the afternoon. So, and I've tested it where, with that levels I'm playing, which is not full reference volume, but not that bad, but I've carefully set up. I carefully chose the apartment that I bought so that it had a room that was kind of isolated and didn't share any walls with anybody and all that type of thing. On the other side of the one shared wall is the hallway, so it's not actually going into anybody else's apartment, and then it's surrounded by the other rooms in my apartment, so it's not directly going to anybody. I've decoupled everything. I've acoustically treated, so all of those things. So at 3 p.m., I'm going to play pretty close to reference volume. I've never had a complaint from anybody, but if I'm 9:30 at night, I want to watch something, I'm going to be considerate. I'm not going to turn that up too loud. I'll put my headphones on instead.
Yeah, my best opportunity to watch movies is just after my wife goes to bed, so I can't. Not really. My wife can tolerate a lot of noise. She's great, man. We're super compatible. Once she zonks out, you could have cannon warfare somewhere in the house, and usually it's good. However, I will wake her up if I go anywhere close to movie volume.
There you go.
I always call it OK TV show volume.
That's right.
Like she can handle. I could have it up at like about a minus 26 dB. And she's still asleep. I've got the door closed to the living room, and she's fine. If I tried to go up where I watch movies at a minus 15 or something, or minus 10, she's going to be texting me from bed going, stop it, which she has done before. It's like, too loud. I'm sorry. So that's another reason why my best time to watch movies is when I need to be a little quieter. So understand completely. Maybe I should try the headphone thing, but I don't know that I'd like it.
You can try for 5 minutes. What can it hurt?
Let's move on to John here. I think we can get through John.
I think this will be the last one this week.
Okay, great. John is about to go ahead and make his new DIY bass trap panels. Cool. And we successfully talked him down from some of the needlessly complicated multi-layer designs he had come across on various forums. Also cool. At this point, he just wants to make panels that are 7 inches deep in total, including a 1-inch air gap at the back, and just using bats of Rockwool insulation in a basic frame.
Okay.
Nice. You're going to get great results. And rather than trying to make very large panels that would require cutting the bats of insulation to make them perfectly fit the custom size, he realized that if he just uses standard 16-inch on-center bats of insulation, rather than bats meant for 24-inch on-center framing, he'll be able to mount a few of them side by side to get the coverage that he wants. That ought to simplify things, right?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Not the least of which is mounting them on the walls, too. It's a lot easier to deal with a modular system than one huge, unwieldy panel.
Yeah, and they're going to match up to the studs in your wall. So that's nice.
That's also true.
So for him, it's convenient to buy the bats of insulation at his local Lowe's store. But of course, the Rockwool brand offers several different options with different names. The regular Comfort Bat are listed as being 3.5 inches deep. The Safe and Sound for Addicts version is the same price, but listed as being 3 inches deep. And then there's the Comfort Board version listed at 2 inches deep. He can stack a couple of layers, or 3 layers in the case of the Comfort Board, to get the total thickness he is after. Is there a significant enough difference in terms of their acoustical properties as bass traps to make any particular version worth it over any of the others?
Nope.
No.
Get the cheapest one that'll work.
Yeah. Just stack them up and buy the cheap stuff. You're on the right track, man.
Yeah. I mean, normally I just go with whatever was intended for absolutely standard 2x4 framing, which is the 3.5 inch depth. Now he seemed quite specific. He's like, he wants 7 inches front to back. So, I mean, you could just get 2 of the 3.5 inches and put that together. But he's like, he designed his frame so they'll have a 1-inch air gap behind them. Performance-wise, whether you had 7 inches of insulation or 6 inches of insulation and a 1-inch air gap, performance-wise, there's really not a lick of difference. Okay. So you really can go either way. But I'm also thinking it's like, he wants to mount them in the particular places and size that he wanted. So having the 1-inch air gap on the back of the frame actually makes mounting a lot easier than having the insulation flush to the back. So I can see maybe that's the very reason he's doing it. But I mean, I would absolutely go with whatever is the cheapest option. And that's not always the same, right? Sometimes you look up the price online and the price in store is different, or they're running a sale on what they have in stock in store. So just get whatever's cheap. It's almost certainly not the Comfort Bat. The Comfort Bat is always more expensive than the other ones. So or the Comfort Board, I'm saying. The Comfort Board is the more expensive one. So it's almost certainly not going to be that one. But whether it's Comfort Bat or the Safe and Sound Addict makes not a lick of difference to the performance.
Isn't it great when you can recommend the cheap stuff?
Yep.
You know what? The simplest approach works. The cheapest stuff works.
All of them being Rockwool are very easy to work with. None of them are going to compress over time. None of them are going to give you like irritation on your skin, although I would still recommend wearing gloves while you're handling it. But very, very easy to work with, holds its shape, easy to use. So it's going to be great no matter what.
How about that? An easy answer.
Yeah.
Just do the easy thing. You're on the right track.
So, as far as people who are on the list already are Spencer and Gurinder. We'll get to you guys first up next week, unless we missed somebody and they remind me. They might skip the line if they were a missed question. I do apologize.
One day we're going to get to my discussion of center channel
I think we've only
speakers.
got 2 or 3 weeks left before Tom is back, so we're going to have to.
We better make it
plan on it.
a priority. Then we're going to have to actually plan it out and just jam it in there, because that's just how it's going to work.
I thought it was going to happen this week, because when questions were coming in, I'm like, oh, we don't have that many questions this week, and then every time without fail, I'm like, nope. Turns out we have more questions than I thought.
Right,
Always
priority on the
goes.
listeners and not me, but we'll get to me.
But yes, before we leave for the episode entirely, just want to once again thank Anchor for their support of Tom after the podcast, after the hurricanes. It was tremendous of what Anchor did there, sending over that Solix portable power station. So huge thanks to Anchor, ongoing, forever and ever. We'll always be grateful to them for that. And we do want to thank our listeners of the week as well. Jason, Richard, Karl, Andrew, and Gregory. Thank you all so much for sending in those PayPal donations to support Tom. Really appreciate that. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation to support the bills for keeping the podcast going.
Yeah.
So big thanks to our 132 patrons who are holding strong over there. Also want to send thanks to John and Infinite Gary for sending movie codes over to Tom, and Aaron for sending a movie code to me. That only works in Canada, so Tom can't make use of that one. Thank you, gentlemen, for all of those. John, thank you for offering to send like a whole bunch of items to Tom. If he can make any use of the ones that you're offering for free, or if he wants to purchase your Vizio TV or Crown amplifiers, those are on offer, and so that's all been forwarded over to Tom as well. And then Nathan for offering to send Tom some Triad Bronze satellite speakers.
Nice.
Really nice of you as well. So thank you all so much for all that support. It's tremendous. And we don't want to leave without also thanking the people who've sent in notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. Those folks include John, Mike, Sasi, Gurinder, J. Karl, Kevin, Karl, Aaron, and Paul. And Nelson too, right?
And Nelson sent me a message. He wrote very nice.
So
yes, and I have to use my best radio voice.
That's what we're going to do. So thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. If you want your questions answered on this here podcast, you just have to email them to us. question@avrant.com is that email address, and by far the best way to reach us. So I will say, on behalf of Tom Andry, this has been AV Rant. I'm Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.